meeting to order. This is the regular meeting of the Northfield Public School Board. Today is Monday, May 14, 2018, and the time is 7 o'clock p.m. Dr. Hillman, there were just a few personnel items in the table file.
Yes, you had 3 appointments and then a number of increase, decreases, and changes in assignment this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. If there's no objections, we'll add these items to the agenda as we move forward. We have an opportunity now for public comment. This is a chance for anyone residing in the Northfield Public School District to address the board. Is there anyone here who wishes to address the board? Okay, seeing no one come forward, we'll move on to announcements and recognitions. Dr. Hillman.
Yes, I have 3 announcements this evening. First of all, we'd like to congratulate Nicole Kozlak. She's a Northfield High School student who won the State FFA Prepared Public Speaking Contest held on April 24th. She'll be competing at the National Convention in October. Nicole's a sophomore and most of her competitors were seniors, so we want to congratulate Nicole. Just want to remind folks too that the FFA program at Northfield High School is a great example of our collaboration that we attempt to with a number of other organizations. In this case, it's a collaborative effort with Randolph, Minnesota, a case where they have a very strong ag program. We just haven't had enough students to offer that here, so students get that opportunity there. And in the fall, if you come across the National FFA Convention is actually broadcast on RFD TV. It's a rural television station, and it's phenomenal. If you watch a little bit of, especially some of the public speaking or some of the other things, it really is just a testament to how strong rural America is and the kind of leadership opportunities that agricultural focused students have an opportunity to engage in. So I'm really serious. Watch for it this fall. It's a pretty cool event, and the passion behind our FFA students is really fantastic. So congratulations to Nicole. We're very proud of her. Not shocking, the Northfield Area Learning Center has been recognized yet again, and they received a 2018 Minnesota Promising Practice Award on May 10th at the Character Recognitions Awards ceremony in St. Paul. Our Northfield ALC was one of 6 schools and 4 community programs honored by Synergy and Leadership Exchange for excellence in character and ethical leadership development. The celebration coincided with Governor Dayton's proclamation of May 10th as Character Recognition Day, and Minnesota State Secretary of State Steve Simon presented the proclamation at the ceremony. The award was received for the practice implementing social emotional learning curriculum to enhance students' personal responsibility. Students plan service activities to give back to the community and are working to ensure there is a respectful and welcoming atmosphere for new students. The practice is having a positive effect at the ALC, and recent survey results show 100% of students feel welcomed at the school, respected, and safe. So we know the ALC has always been just a little bit ahead of our other schools in some of the pieces that we've been working on, and so their implementation of SEL a full year before the rest of the district did it is really paying some dividends. And so great leadership, Daryl Keller and the entire staff over at ALC, because they are always looking at what is next for their students, and 100% of students feeling welcome and safe and respected, I think we'll take that, right? So that's a good thing. Finally, I just want to remind board members that tomorrow is the annual Career Exploration Day at Northfield Middle School. It's hosted by the Technology and Engineering Booster Club. They do have an opportunity for parents to see the displays from 7:15 or so to 8 o'clock, but it'll be open all morning. If you would like to attend, you certainly can. It's a kind of an a la carte kind of thing. And when we've been reading in the paper about where the opportunities for students and careers are, right? We're talking a lot about a lot of the businesses that will be there tomorrow. We know that a lot of the businesses that will be there tomorrow would hire some of our students on the spot. And these are not necessarily all, in fact, many of them are fields where training in high school or training in high school plus some certificate programs or a 2-year degree would lead students to a high $80,000 to $90,000 position, and some of these even over 6 figures. And so this is an area when you read every week in the business section about how there's a severe shortage of technically skilled laborers, you are going to see the people who are doing that work tomorrow. And we know that this is an area in Northfield where we can do better. It's an opportunity for continuous improvement. We have an excellent college preparation program, traditional 4-year. Board members know we've been working really hard to try to make sure that we're providing that career pathway for students who maybe don't want to have that 4-year experience but are looking for that more technical piece. And so we've talked about this through previous bond referenda in terms of how we might be able to use facilities to help with that. But we're also looking at some other ways that we could create a stronger pathway for students to go right from high school into the workforce and to be able to take some of these very technically skilled jobs. So if you have an opportunity, I really encourage you to attend that tomorrow. It is a really cool day, and the weather's going to be nice, and usually they have hot dogs or something, so there's always that bonus. So
It's at the high school?
it's at the middle school, and you'll see it very quickly when you see all of the very large, heavy equipment out in front of the middle school, because there's going to be lots of different things.
And there's enough road construction, you have to be thoughtful about how to get there.
This is true, and actually the people who do that road construction will probably be there telling their story too, so maybe they'll just walk down for Highway 1. But yes, make sure you plan accordingly with the obvious. We have 2 seasons in Minnesota, winter and road construction, and they went from one right to the other this time. So those are your announcements for this evening.
Excellent. Anything anyone would like to add? Rob?
I just wanted to add, because I spent a couple of years before Margaret took over as liaison to the Human Rights Commission, and I've been on the District Youth Council until Ellen took over, and I also go to the Arts and Culture Commission meetings, and I've always been really impressed by the students who are the youth representatives on those boards and commissions. And I was reminded today by Danny Allen that he and Jaria were at their last meeting before they graduate, and I really appreciate the work they do, and they're really, have become an integral part of those boards and commissions.
Excellent. Well said, Rob. Yeah, they really take that service very seriously, and their voice adds great value to the conversation and discussion. The only thing I wanted to add, of course, is prom. This past weekend, another safe prom and wonderful event. The prom committee, again made up of students, helping to make that a great event for their fellow students, and of course the after prom party, which is just an amazing event. And I know we are the envy of many communities that we have this really safe, wonderful party, and well attended. Even those that, what I really like is even those who don't go to prom feel, are there as well. So it's really very inclusive. And of course, thanks to Terry and Julie Heileman, the owners of Jesse James Lanes. I believe they're at around 30 years of hosting this. So, just a great place and a great space to do it. And then the whole community comes together with donations. And so we really want to thank everyone for that amazing weekend that we're able to provide for our students.
I was
Yes,
on the
right.
prom food committee a few years ago, and the donations by community businesses is amazing.
I know, we just are
Just
so
amazing.
fortunate. We are so fortunate. And when I tell other communities what we do, I so wish we could do something like that, because kids kind of go off and they do want to keep the party going, but there's just a lot of concern around safety when they're all heading off to different places. So to get them all corralled and enjoy each other till the wee hours of the morning is really a great event.
I was actually at the after prom party this year, and they said it was 36 years they had been
excellent.
at Jesse James Lane, which is huge,
Wow.
and it was a great party. I just want to add one other announcement.
for sure.
That the concert choir is singing at the Twins game this Sunday.
This
So
Sunday, okay.
if you're watching it on TV or they happen to be there, they sing during the 7th inning stretch. So be sure to watch for them.
Is it Take Me Out to the Ball Game? Or
No, it's like America the Beautiful.
They say God bless America.
God bless America, that's
Oh,
it.
okay. Wonderful. Excellent. Well,
That's
thank you.
their
very much.
tradition anyway.
Yes, it's the same one.
All right, good. Well, we could probably spend all night talking about all the great things happening, but we do need to get on for items for discussion and report. Our first one, we love when she comes every year, Child Nutrition Director Stephanie Strummy will present the 2018-19 proposed child nutrition budget.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for inviting me here. I enjoy coming to visit with all of you. And I just want to start with a little background of our program from the school year, and we'll go into the budget. I know Val really gets excited about that when I get to talk about my budget. So I will begin. So So as part of Northfield's strategic plan and beliefs, the Child Nutrition Department, we share the responsibility and understand the importance of partnering together to create a world-class learning environment. This photo taken, I know it's a little bit dark, but on the right-hand side, there's an adult who comes in to breakfast, and at all of the elementary schools, we have adults who come in. I believe it was through the Healthy Community Initiative, a program that they developed where students are read to in the morning by an adult. And so it's a really neat program, and it just shows the strength of our community partnerships that we do have and the involvement with them. By providing quality, nutritious meals that support the growth and development of our students to fuel their learning, we have helped partner in creating a positive learning environment for our students. I would like to take this time to publicly thank all of my staff every day. I mean, they work so hard. Bruce and I were talking earlier, and he said he started out in food service, and he said, I just think back to those days where you're in there and really in the trenches, and they work really hard, and they try and be there every day, have a smile on their faces so that it's a great time for those kids when they're coming through and having their meals. I just wanted to include a little fun fact for all of you that we have had over 100,000 pounds of produce served this year to our students. So that's just kind of a neat value that I think shows that we really like to have a lot of fresh produce and vegetables for our students to eat. This slide represents how many meals have been served through May 1st at each level of our schools. Combined, we've served over 377,000 lunches, and we've served over 81,000 breakfasts. This was as of May 1st, so we know that that value will continue to grow throughout the rest of the school year. Breakfast has been suggested to positively affect learning in children, and it affects their behavior, their cognitive performance, and their overall school performance. During the school year of 2018, we did see a reduction in breakfast by about 5%. We attribute this reduction to fewer kindergarten students participating in the free breakfast program, and part of that was we have moved our breakfast from the classroom to the cafeteria, and so we've seen that fewer kids may participate during that day for breakfast. It was also noticed that breakfast participation in the middle school decreased, and actually it was quite significant. If I go back to the previous slide, you'll see that breakfast at the middle school, we served as of May 1st about 6,400 meals, whereas at the high school we were at about 16,000. And when we saw that value, it was concerning to us, so we decided to put out a survey and see why this value was so significantly different. And what we found was from the 770 survey responses received, we saw that about 74% of those participants said that they are eating breakfast at home before they come to school, which is great. We were really excited to see that they were eating before they came to school, so they were at least getting a meal and had nutrition that they needed. To encourage a healthy breakfast and increase school performance, we have worked with the middle school to include breakfast tips that go out in their newsletters. So each month we kind of have a little blurb that maybe is associated with May or June or September, October. And so Greg Gelino has worked with us and partnered so that we can get that information out in newsletters, encouraging students to eat a healthy breakfast, whether it be at home or at school, and that they know that breakfast is available at school. During school year 2018, we saw an increase in lunch meal participation by about 5.6%. One of the main contributors to this increase was the positive impact that the Grilled Greats line had at the high school and middle school. They've been serving over 150 to 200 meals each day at each site. So we really saw a great increase with this. The overall percent increase in participation could have been even greater with our meals, but because of the 4 snow days that we had, we know that we lost several days of participation with that. So I did on this slide indicate just the middle school and high school last year versus this year, because I wanted to show the increase in the amount of meals that we were serving for those students. During school year 27-2018, we have seen that increase in meal participation of approximately 5.6%. Because of this increase, we did also have an increase in our state and federal reimbursement rates. So this allowed our revenue to increase even greater than we had anticipated. In February, we received a report from the Minnesota Department of Education indicating that our district's food service fund balance was out of compliance by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Per regulations, a school food authority must limit its net cash resources to an amount not exceeding 3 months of its fund balance and their average expenditures for the nonprofit school food service. So our food service fund showed that we had an increase of about $90,000 from fiscal year 2017. So the Minnesota Department of Education required us to provide a plan in writing to spend down the excess fund balance. The last several years we allowed our fund balance to grow, so we knew that we were exceeding that value, but we allowed it to grow because of the possible changes with the master's facility plan. At this time, we're planning to allocate some of these funds towards new equipment. So we're making intentional purchases of new equipment that we need at each of the sites. Also in the fall, our entire child nutrition program, so that's about 30 staff members, will be going to Jordan Public Schools, and we're putting on a day where it's staff development for child nutrition employees, so they all get to partake in that. Also, we're going to see that there's an increase in salary and benefits for food service employees, in which we expect to see about a 6.75% total package increase over the next 2 years. In prior years, we were required to complete the paid lunch equity tool to determine our meal prices. This year, the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2018 states that any school food authority with a positive or zero balance in their nonprofit school fund balance as of January 31st is exempt from completing these requirements. So due to the excess funds that we have in our fund balance, we will not be raising our meal prices for the 3rd year in a row. Typically, we had been raising meal prices every other year, but we will be offsetting these funds rather than raising the meal prices. We will be using funds from our fund balance to keep that price the same. A revision of the 27-2018 budget was completed due to unexpected expenditures from the Minnesota Department of Education to address the fund balance in excess for 3 months. And we also revised the 27-18 food budget because of lower than anticipated food costs and additional salary expenditures. You will see this is just a chart of the proposed revised budget that we are suggesting. So the adopted budget included revenues of just over $2.1 million and expenditures of just over $2.2 million. Due to the personnel changes, lower than expected food costs, and a revised revenue forecast with actual participation for the school year, we are recommending that the revised budget include a revenue of just over the $2.2 million and expenditures of $2.1 million. So we kind of reversed those two. We are projecting a surplus of approximately $50,000, which is more favorable than our original plan, as we thought we were going to have expenditures of about $59,000. And we're also expecting that we're going to be exceeding our max fund balance at the end of this school year as well, due to our increased lunch participation. So just to go over some of the new things that we did this year with our programs. At the middle school, one thing that we did, we partnered with the Family and Consumer Sciences classes, and they created healthier food dip recipes. These recipes included Greek yogurt as the base of the recipes, and the FACS classes then took this Greek yogurt and created other recipes. They took their top 3 choices and we sampled them out to students during the lunch hour. And with that, I know it's a little bit hard to see, but we created a QR code so that students were able to use their iPads and complete a survey then as that was brought up. And so then we got immediate results of which dip won actually, and as they went through the line they had fruits and vegetables that they could sample with those items. And they ended up choosing a dip that was made with Greek yogurt, salsa, low sodium taco seasoning, and then fresh cilantro, and they named it the Raider dip. And we now have that on our line, so oftentimes, you know, if we have on our burrito line, or if we have taco day or something like that, then the students are able to have that. And so they really seem to enjoy it. They're going through it. So hopefully they're eating their vegetables too as they're enjoying it. As I had mentioned earlier, the Grilled Greats line was really a great addition to our meal program. It's offered at the high school and the middle school. It is an additional reimbursable line. In the past, these items were only offered as a la carte options, but we created this meal line so that it would be a reimbursable meal and would allow every student then the ability to go through this line and purchase a meal. They've enjoyed it so much, and I was telling Julie earlier, that the students were actually asking if they could go to the other lines and get hot vegetables. They wanted to go and get broccoli. We didn't have warm vegetables available at this line, so what we're doing is we're actually going to be altering that flat line there and putting in hot wells so that we can be serving hot vegetables through those lines as well for the students this year. A fun thing that Greenville Park did, the child nutrition staff engaged with the students on a manners challenge. Sometimes we know as those little kids are coming through the line, it's a great time of day to be visiting, and sometimes it's hard to stand in line and keep your hands to yourself and things like that. So they encouraged the manners challenge, and we really have seen a difference of kids going through, using their manners, please and thank you. As they're walking through the line, they know that they're being watched on how their manners are. 3 classrooms were chosen, and they were given a gold, silver, and a bronze award. This has happened several times during the school year, so these awards are passed around to the different classrooms. And then one of their school-wide celebrations, the students were dressing up for Fancy Day, so the child nutrition staff took it a step further, and they had tablecloths and flowers that day when the kids came to lunch, so that they got to have a fancy day, and then the staff dressed up in white shirts and bow ties and things, just to kind of create the experience for the kids. We also had a few special visitors at a couple of our elementary schools. Officer Bart Weiss and Deputy Police Chief Mark Dukatz served lunch for the kids at Greenville Park Elementary. And then Princess Kay of the Milky Way was at Sibley, and she went around to the different tables and visited with the students. I know she was also in the classrooms encouraging students to drink their milk. We continue to work with local farmers and try to grow our farm-to-school products. These are just a few photos of some of the farm-to-school meals that we've had available. This past fall, the Minnesota Department of Agriculture came to Northfield Middle School to celebrate Farm-to-School Month and accomplishments through the Agricultural Farm-to-School Grant Program. Staff and leadership from the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, Representative David Bly, Northfield School Board Chair Julie Pritchard, Superintendent Matt Hillman, and Farm to School partners were all present. They took a tour of the kitchen, and they also had lunch out in the cafeteria with the students. It was a Minnesota Thursday, so the meal that we had that day, we had Thousand Hills hot dogs, watermelon radishes from Open Hands Farm, which is a local farm here near us, corn in the cob, Fireside Apple Orchard apples, Johnny Pops, which is a frozen dessert that originated at St. Olaf College, and then milk from Hastings Creamery. One other item that we've done to try and increase the intake of fruits and vegetables is at our elementary snack cart. You can see on the top there we have fresh fruits. On the second shelf, it's hard to see, but we're doing packages of fresh vegetables so the students can choose on the snack cart if they want to have a variety of fresh vegetables. And it really depends, but they've had snow peas on there, cucumbers, just a variety of fresh items for them to choose from. And also at the middle school in their a la carte, we're doing fruit and vegetable cups, which you can see on the top of the shelf there. We did also have at the Northfield High School, the child nutrition staff worked along with the World Languages Department to celebrate World Language Week. And this year we offered a chicken and bean burrito and assorted vegetable toppings. We had a chips and salsa bar, mango salsa, pico de gallo, guacamole, different things. And then they also had plantains that they were able to enjoy. And for our Chinese day, we did an Asian bowl. And it was kind of fun because we did the to-go boxes that you would see if you went into an Asian restaurant, and they were able to fill those with chicken and the fried rice. And then on top of that, we added a bunch of fresh vegetables. So you'll see snow peas, shredded carrots, red peppers, and then they could pick from 3 sauces what they wanted to do. So they got to create their own bowl that day. So now I will move on to the proposed budget for 2018-19. Revenue for school year of 2018-19 is calculated by projecting actual participation for this current school year and assuming that participation will stay similar. At this time, we don't know what the state or federal reimbursement rates will be, but we're assuming that they will stay the same. Typically, we have increased meal prices every other year, as I had mentioned earlier, but it's our goal to provide quality, nutritious, and affordable meals to our families. So we want to make sure that we're continuing to support the growth and development of our students. So we know that we're operating a business and we need to remain fiscally responsible, but because of the excess funds in our fund balance, we feel that we are going to keep the meal prices the same for this year. And next year we are anticipating a slight decline in kindergarten breakfast at Bridgewater because they have been serving in the classrooms and they will also be moving out to the cafeteria. So we expect a change with that. And Greenville Park Elementary, when they started eating out in the cafeteria, we did see that decline. So we are expecting that with Bridgewater. And one expected change being made over the lunch hour will be the implementation of the Northfield High School Flex Hour, which you'll be hearing about from Joel Lear later on in your meeting. But at this time, we're unable to anticipate what the effect will be on our participation. We know that there will be changes, but we're proposing that our revenue for the school year 2018-2019 at this time would be just over the $2.2 million. Procurement requirements for a primary food vendor, we're required to go out and bid every 4 years. This year, to increase our purchasing power, we combined a small co-op with actually 9 other districts, and Minnetonka Schools is the base district for that. But we felt a lot of these other districts have the same values and beliefs as us as far as child nutrition departments and the products that they're using. So we thought that it would increase our buying power because smaller districts, we can go together and purchase more items together. So after completing the RFP process, we will be changing our primary food vendor. Currently, we're with Upper Lakes Foods, but we will be moving to Indian Head Foods. And they're a quality, they're well known for their K-12 programs and services that they have. So after consulting with our food vendors, we're expecting that food prices will rise by about 2 to 3% for next year. And the proposed budget for expenditures for school year 2018-19 is $2.2 million. In addition, we're expecting to have increased supply expenditures due to the flex schedule with the high school. We're going to be switching to compostable trays and looking at other products, compostable silverware and things, so we know that that will be an added expense to us. At this time, we don't know what that expense will be, so we'll have to reevaluate as the year goes next year with that. We're also looking at possibly completing a remodel of the lower cafeteria. It's something that had been in the plans prior, but because of the facilities maintenance plan, we hadn't made any changes, and now we're reevaluating and taking a look at that to see if we can make some changes that meet the needs of our student population. So for the 2018-2019 budget, we're proposing that a total revenue of $2,219,900 and expenditures of $2,234,000 would occur. We're projecting to end fiscal year 19 with a fund balance of $751,778. Our department goal, as we've mentioned in this presentation, is not to exceed the 3 months average based on a 9-month operating year. The fund balance maximum for school year 2018-19 should not exceed $744,000, but we believe after the revisions for the high school flex period, the fund balance will be in compliance after next year. I want to thank you all for the opportunity for me to tell you about my program, and if you have any questions, I welcome them.
As always, excellent presentation, Stephanie. Thank you. Questions, comments board members have?
Margaret?
Hi, I have several. Shall I just start one
Sure.
and then, okay. I'll just ask my first and then
Okay.
take turns. How are we doing with food waste?
Food waste, you know, it's not something that we've looked closely. We'll occasionally go and we'll, you know, kind of evaluate and look at the garbages and things like that, but it's not anything that we've really looked super closely at.
Okay.
I know that Jim Kulseth and I have had conversations about it because obviously he knows because they will, you know, they're in charge of the garbage. But it is something that when we move to the compostable products, we're hoping that that will help increase the amount that's composted here in the high school. Because right now, there isn't as much composting as we would like to see. And so we're hoping that at least there will be some benefit with that.
And I'm sorry, I should have prefaced this with thank you. This was a great report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Other questions? Amy?
Thank you. Thank you for coming, and it is an excellent report, and it's made me very hungry reading it. So, I have, first of all, I have to say I'm very excited about your using local sources like you do, and I want to encourage you to keep on looking for local sources that you can use. I think that helps with having the fresh food, it helps the local economy, it helps the kids stay healthy. It's all win all around, so thank you for doing that.
Thanks.
I also had a question about the compostable trays, and we may be jumping the gun because we haven't heard the other presentation. I guess my question is, are you planning a combination of regular trays for people who eat in the cafeteria and compostable trays for people who go off to other locations? Or what's your thinking going into compostable trays, and why are you changing to them instead of just having collection points for other trays? Or
So that was something that was considered, and we've talked about. We actually will be doing the pilot week coming up on the 21st, so next week. We did consider doing compostable trays and then regular trays, but what we find is those regular trays disappear and are not returned. Currently, that's happening, and so we just fear that a lot of that stuff will not be coming back to us, so then that's an added expense that will just be exposed of, and we won't find it. We do find trays. Unfortunately, we've seen them out being driven over by cars and, you know, just different things like that. So we decided we wanted to look at doing the compostable trays, because also they'll be going out into the areas of the school. And so it was just something that they wanted to take a look at and see. And hopefully, another reason is we're hoping that it will encourage the high school students to compost more of their other products too.
I just wonder, with all the lunches that you're serving, that's a lot of trays and a lot of
It is.
compost. So
It is.
So I'll be
It
curious to find out how the trial works.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Yep, thanks.
Ellen?
So I had two questions, but first, what I really appreciated was not just the colorful slides, you know, colorful plate, but the stories that you have about the social emotional learning being happening right with the creative ways that it's being implemented at Greenville Park, and then the Raider Dip is all part of the learning. And so I know the District Youth Council came back this last week, where the person who's on the wellness, I think it's Alice, that's on a wellness committee, and trying to get student ideas. So I really value what you've been able to do in just taking our strategic plan and making it happen in just really creative ways. So my two questions, one was the 74%, the middle school survey, there was 19% that said no time, and like on around 150 students. And so I don't know if you have any sense, like, are the buses coming so late? And I know at the high school there's that great grab and go cart. You know, it's just, I talked to Dr. Hillman, and it's like, you never know, students might just say, oh, no time. But it's just
Right.
like, oh, shoot, is there something we can do?
Yep. And Greg and I have had conversations about that. The one thing with the middle school is we discourage food being out in the classrooms. And so for them to have, at high school, we have the grab and go cart, but there's a little more ability for them to be eating in the classrooms. Whereas at the middle school, we haven't been allowing that, and so they don't have that time. Students are, if the bus does come through late, they do still get to go through the line, so we never don't allow them to do that. So if a bus is coming in late, they still have the ability, and then they're actually given, I think it's just a little stamp with a smiley face that shows that they were in getting breakfast, and that they are then, allowed to come in their class, and it's excused, an excused tardy. So we have worked with them to be able to do that. And I don't know, part of that, they don't have time, may also be at home. They don't have time to. So, and that's why we're trying to, encourage as much as we can. We have talked about doing that with the carts, but I just don't, at this point, we haven't explored it any further.
Is that okay for one more question?
Sure.
So, and then I had a question, the 47,500 towards the new equipment. Which building is that at? The steamer combination onion cooler freezer shelving?
So that's at a variety of our schools.
Across the schools,
Yep.
okay.
So the middle school, we put in a reach-in cooler behind the salad bar because they had been using a double cooler that was kind of out of the way. So they were running back and forth, just so to increase efficiency. We purchased a piece of equipment behind, and actually behind there was a reach-in warmer that, because of the flex scheduling, we were able to utilize here at the high school. So we just transported that warmer over to the high school then, and it hadn't been utilized at the middle school because it was a salad bar, and they didn't need warm foods behind there. So we were able to change that. We are purchasing a new combi oven for Sibley Elementary. They have a current steamer that is very old, and we've had to do a lot of servicing for it, and so we're just anticipating that we will need that change, so we're getting a combi oven instead, so we can do multiple methods of cooking with that. The high school, we're also doing the hot well, so we can increase the vegetables there. I'm trying to think of what other pieces of equipment that we've purchased. Oh, we did get a new steamer also at Bridgewater too. So it's a combination. We're hitting all of the schools that needed necessary equipment.
Thank you.
Margaret, you had another question.
Yeah, unless somebody.
Well, Amy
I
has
have
another
one
one,
too,
but she's
but-
already asked one, so it
Okay.
would be your turn. No, oh, I'm sorry. Let's let no go.
Good report.
Thank you.
The state may scold us for having too much fund balance,
They did.
but it's encouraging because it's a result of increased participation. And that's really speaks well of the food service program. I had a call from a parent some time ago saying at that high school level, don't change the length of the lunch hour period because their child needed that for socializing as well as time for meal.
Yeah.
Good report. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good job, keep up the good work.
Thank you.
I just said to, if we move to compostable trays, I would just suggest maybe having multiple compost locations.
Yep.
So they don't end up in the trash.
Yep.
And then I'm curious, what we do here at Northfield Public Schools, you see these horror stories on the internet of people dumping out a child's lunch because their fund balance is overdue. How do we handle that at Northfield Public School?
Students are served a meal, whether their account is negative or not, and we don't substitute. You know, you'll hear stories of children getting an alternate meal,
Right.
But they receive the same meal that any other student would receive as they're going through the line.
Wonderful. So we put the pressure on the adults dealing with the problem rather than the child. Is there an angel fund, so to speak, that parents can donate to at various schools?
Yep, we do have an angel fund. We have one set up at each of our school levels, or actually each of our schools have them, and we receive donations from community businesses, from local churches, individuals will do that. And so oftentimes they'll tell us that they want the specific angel funds to go to a certain school, or they may say, you know, if it's a large amount, then they'll split that amount, you know, just let us split it amongst, you know, what we think is appropriate.
Wonderful. And I also do love this farm to school program. I think I'll never forget the purple carrots. They were so delicious. I know the kids were afraid of them, but they were wonderful. So thank you.
If I could just make one comment on the question about students with negative lunch balances, I think you make it an important point. You know, it's not our philosophy to take food from children now. They can't buy a la carte, right?
Correct.
That's a different, you know, so that's
That's
different,
different.
that's reasonable. But the other piece is that for folks who might be concerned about, are we, you know, letting all of this money go? What we do is it's never a child's fault that they don't have enough money in their account. But we are assertive, is the term that I will use, with a collections agency. And so we have even taken, I think, small claims court, I think we were close to once, almost, okay, well, but we do use a collections agency to make sure that we try to get those dollars. Not that we always do, but I want to point out that while we'll never take kids' food, we are also making sure that we're diligent about getting the money that we are owed, which is, I think is really important. And Child Nutrition does a great job of making everyone feel equal, and then the finance office does a great job of making sure that we get our money, because that is fair. That is only fair. And in addition, if there is a family who is struggling to pay, we then, of course, Stephanie's team does an excellent job of helping them create the paperwork for the free and reduced lunch program, because it is available. There's no reason that a child should ever go hungry in this particular system, and Stephanie's team has just been phenomenal with that, and the finance team has backed her up.
And I so appreciate that. It's the way it should be done. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Amy?
It was sort of a segue to my next question, because I love how this meeting is all tied together in an interesting way. But later on in
Planned it that way.
Rehearsals help.
Later on in the agenda, we're talking about handbooks and stuff, and I looked through the handbooks and I saw that both the free and the reduced lunch students get free lunches. Is that right? So even the reduced lunch people are getting free lunches. Is that new next year, or how long has that been?
No, that's been probably the last 3 or 4 years. The state of Minnesota covers the additional 40 cents of the cost, so that it used to be that if you received reduced price meal benefits, you paid 40 cents for a meal. The state covers that additional cost so that students are able to receive a meal at no charge.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
It just leads me to ask the question, why do we even have a reduced price lunch unless it's a category for other uses in the schools?
Okay.
Okay. but it has nothing to do with lunch. So,
And breakfast as well, if they also receive free breakfast at no charge as well, if they're on the free or reduced program.
Yeah, those are federally designated categories, Amy, so we still use those varying categories for certain kinds of discounts in terms of like on iPad insurance, you know, or activity sliding scale for activities. So it's a federal designation that we don't have a choice in terms of completing the paperwork in that way, and it's used for other pieces. But Governor Dayton, that was something he proposed several years ago to cover that reduced lunch price so that Minnesota kids get it for free, whether you're free or reduced.
excellent.
No, you have a comment.
Who is replacing Upper Great Lakes Food Services?
It'll be Indian Head Food Service,
Where are they located?
out of Eau Claire, Wisconsin.
I'm frowning because I think we're replacing a Northfield business with a Wisconsin business.
Yeah, and actually, to add to that, they're based out of Cloquet, Minnesota, and so all of our product comes out of Cloquet versus the Northfield warehouse here. Just
Thank you.
so you're aware, yeah.
And,
oops,
I'm
sorry.
Go ahead.
With that, they did put a bid into the RFP, but unfortunately, they didn't win the bid, so they had the opportunity for the business, because with the RFP, they're required to submit so much information for us, and they all are asked to submit the same information. And so, unfortunately, they weren't the company.
So it's not by choice, it's by bidding.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yep, yep.
Any other questions or comments?
Can I comment?
Absolutely.
So Stephanie does a masterful job with her budget. Literally cannot say enough good things about it. She is constantly looking for ways to save money or resources while still expanding her program. And so her not only strong fund balance, but technically out of compliance fund balance, which if I'm going to get a letter from MDE, that is definitely the letter I would like, is really a testament to the way she manages her budget, and leads by example and has her staff managing and making sure that they're all always double checking. So this fund balance is really what's going to allow her to implement this flex learning at the high school, and we were very intentional about not including any kind of estimated expenses because we're really not 100% sure what they're all going to be or if there's going to be any impact on participation. So we were very intentional about that. Okay. And we will bring back a revised budget once we have some time to analyze what the costs are and how that's going to impact it. But I have to say, she didn't even blink. If it's going to be good for kids, how do we support the building and what can we do? So she does an excellent job. So. But I just wanted to let you know that that was an intentional thing that we left out for good reasons. So,
Just dovetail on what Val said, you know, sometimes people might equate sound fiscal management, you know, with the sheeping of the product or the quality. And I am incredibly proud of the high level of food service that we provide our students. It's when I have someone who wants to go out to lunch, I will often say, hey, why don't we get to the cafeteria? And initially they look at me like, what are you talking about? And then we go down and we usually get a salad, and people are just so amazed at the freshness of the food. They're just amazed at how it is presented, the professionalism of the staff. And so that always goes back to leadership. So it's not just Stephanie's leadership, but she has also been very intentional about making sure that she is developing her kitchen managers, because it's the kitchen manager on a daily basis who are making some of these very important decisions. And they all will tell you that they feel Stephanie has their back. It's not uncommon to see her rolling up her sleeves with a hairnet in the cafeterias helping out if someone is gone. And the fact that because she's willing to do that work, the respect that she has from her kitchen managers is unparalleled. And so I just, again, goes to great testament of Stephanie's leadership, how she empowers her kitchen managers and really models the servant leadership and continuous improvement service that we really want in our school district. And I love that she is connected it all with a strategic plan, because it goes to show that our district level departments see where we're going academically, and they say, I'm going to do my part to make it happen. So we can't say enough good about Stephanie.
Absolutely. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, our next item for discussion is the proposed 2018-19 community service budget, and here to present is Director of Community Services, Erin Bateman.
Good evening. Thank you for having me here tonight to present the community services budget. I'm going to start with just some of the reminders of what the principles of community education are. And as you look at this screen, I'm going to share a couple of highlights from fiscal year 2016-17. In community services programs, we serve just under 38,000 children, youth, and adults through all areas of our programming. We had just under 102,000 people who had access to district facilities through community services. So this is community members and those that are outside this school day. And then at the Greenville Park Community School, we had 649 youth who attended. That would be in elementary through the high school. We then in addition had 442 adults and community members who participated in programming. And we had over 230 medical appointments, and that ranged from dental services to sports physicals, and those were completed with our partnership with Health Finders Collaborative. So just some of the reminders, there are a multitude of programming areas that fall under community services, so I'm just going to share a couple highlights from different areas. One I'm excited to share is we've expanded our programming locations for adult basic education. The adult basic education is our services for English language and GED for adults. And so we expanded our locations this year, and we're going to expand again next year. So this past year, we added Emmaus Church as one of our programming sites. It's actually ended up being probably our best attended programming site. So that was in addition, we've had a long-standing classes at the Northfield Community Resource Center, and we have those both during the day and in the evening. And then we've been offering classes at Greenville Park as well. So this year we added Emmaus Church, and next year we're also going to add a class at the Northfield Library. And so while we are having that class there, we will also be able to help students learn and understand the services that the library provides and how that can help in some of their workforce development and job searches. Throughout this year, I've said we've served 144 students in hand, and we've actually served more than that, but 144 students is a full hand-in-hand preschool, but we've had some move in and some move out, but we do have a full program of hand-in-hand preschool, and that is with both general education students and special education students. We have seen a significant increase in students accessing our school readiness scholarship dollars. So again, we have 3 ways to scholarship children into hand-in-hand preschool: Pathway 1, Pathway 2, and then our school readiness scholarship dollars. And I'll explain later in this presentation why we've had more access of our school readiness dollars. Those are, again, determined by a levy. We also, this year, have 51% of our hand-in-hand general education students qualifying for free and reduced lunch. We know from surveys conducted at Ready, Set, Go Day, again, their parent reported that we at Hand in Hand are now serving the highest percentage of free and reduced lunch students in the Northfield community. So we are out serving the number of free and reduced lunch students that are even at Head Start at this point. We continue to work with other area preschools to increase their capacity to support students with financial need, because what we are learning is we only have so much capacity at Hand in Hand, and we are already ahead in our registration numbers this year for where we were last year at this time. And so continuing to work with preschools because we want to be able to serve all children to have an experience before they enter kindergarten. And then, not that I think you need a reminder of how busy school district facilities continue to be, but for fiscal year 17, some buildings saw usage every day except for Thanksgiving and Christmas. So you're talking about every day except for 2 days out of the year. Those outside district permits for building usage totaled just under $34,000 in rental fees for the year. So that does not include any energy fees or custodial time that may have been part of those permits as well. So first, I just want to share the budget revisions for this current fiscal year. We obviously now know where our fund balance ended on June 30th of 2017, which was at $632,231. In the budget I presented to you last year, I was projecting just a small increase to our fund balance of just over $2,000. In the revised budget, I am projecting revenues of $2,669,212, expenditures of $2,623,758 for an increase in our fund balance of a little over $45,000 for this current fiscal year. So a little bit of some of the factors contributing to those changes in our revenues and expenditures. As you can see, and I've got some historical data up there, we can continue to see increased participation in school-age childcare. This is our Kid Ventures program. I think this is a true testament to, one, to the great staff and leadership that is happening in that program, and the fact that we have community members and families that really need to access this program. And so we continue year after year to see families interested in accessing our school-age child care program. We then had slight increases or decreases in revenues generated in different program areas. Nothing of overly worth mentioning, but some programs are up a little bit in revenue, some are down a little bit in revenue, which happens every year. And then, as I mentioned before, we did this year see some decrease in students awarded Pathway 1 early learning scholarships to attend hand-in-hand preschool and early ventures. So this is not something we actually have control over. We are in a region, and our region is allocated so many funds towards their Pathway scholarships. Northfield as a whole doesn't look like the neediest community in that region. There is priority areas, children that are homeless, foster care, they would always be awarded first. And so even though hand-in-hand preschool serves a high percentage of free and reduced lunch participants, we did not see as many scholarship dollars come our way. We had a lot of students be put on wait lists. Could be that other communities saw more, could be just overall people requesting those Pathway 1 funds were higher. We don't have a lot of answers to that, but what we did instead was, as I mentioned earlier, we put those students on our school readiness levy dollars. So while we don't see as many dollars coming in through the Pathway 1 this year as we did last year, and that might change again next year, depending on how it shakes out, we were still able to cover those who came forward and requesting scholarships. So the community services budget goals are to continue to maintain an overall fund balance that equals or exceeds at least 2 months of the community services division's operating expenses. We are meeting that goal. We will meet it this year, and we will, with the budget I do present for next year, we'll continue to meet that goal. Our other goal is to increase the fund balance for the purpose of larger capital projects. And again, that is in relation to the master facilities plan and being able to carry out those items that are in there, and just knowing that those have an impact on the budget and on the community services division. Just a little bit of the community services fund balance history. Part of the reason for the goal that we have had with wanting to maintain some operating expense is that, as you'll see in the next slide, the largest percentage of our budget is made up by program fees. It does make us susceptible when things within the economy change, and so wanting to make sure we always have that fund balance so that we can be as proactive to any economic changes as possible. So some of the assumptions that are built into next year's budget, we are projecting that we will maintain revenue for fee-based programs similar to what we have experienced this year. We'll have the ability to serve a few more children in Early Ventures Child Care Center. As I think we mentioned here, Matt mentioned, we had to get creative this year. We were actually unable to serve all of our current families in our Early Ventures Child Care Center next year. And this is partly because we had some current families who had children who were preschoolers and then wanted to get their toddler in next year, and our toddler rooms were full. So we did some adjusting of ages in order to accommodate all of our current families.
In doing this, this opened up a handful of preschool slots, and so we will be able to serve a few more new families there. Okay, we are projecting the continuation of Pathway 1 and 2 early learning scholarship funding, and we're basing that off of what we are experiencing in those dollars this year. And then we obviously have several grant applications out right now that we will likely have answers to in the next 2 weeks. So then some of the assumptions for expenditures, appropriate increases in salaries, wages, and insurance. Val's been very helpful about kind of helping us to predict and project those as those bargaining units go through. In hand-in-hand preschool, we have some exciting things happening this next year. One, we are adding a full-time general education EA. This year we had a part-time EA. We are going to increase that to full-time. That is partly based to the needs we see and wanting to do the best we can to support all children in hand-in-hand preschool. We also, as we've mentioned here, are adding an English learner preschool section. This will be taking place at the Northfield Community Resource Center. We will provide scholarships and transportations. We have a bilingual teacher. But again, we'll likely see more expense than revenue generated by this preschool section. And then in early ventures, we will be hiring 2 additional staff. One is because we will, those additional children I talked about that we're able to serve will fill a classroom, which by ratio means we'll need to add another staff in that room. The other reason is the only downfall, if you want to see it that way, of doing the adjustment to the ages is that we are now moving upstairs some children who are not potty trained. And so where in the current configuration, those children are in the lowest level and they do have a bathroom in their room. Going upstairs does not make that possible, which either means if one child needs to go to the bathroom, we take 10 toddlers to the bathroom, or we researched what it would cost to install a bathroom upstairs in a room in Longfellow. It's $90,000. The building is set up as such, it's not very feasible, so we will be hiring an extra staff in that room upstairs that will be serving toddlers. It'll be great to have an extra staff. It'll also help with all the bathroom breaks that need to happen as those children are the ages that they are. And then additional expenses for Kid Ventures and Early Ventures associated with the Child Care Block Grant legislation. So this is legislation that went through in the past year that in order for us to continue to take CCAP dollars, which is the County Assistance dollars, both for Early Ventures and Kid Ventures, there are some very strong new regulations in place that will require FBI fingerprint and background checks and quite other training, staff development. Because our staff has already gone through their background and fingerprinting, and we need to do it again, we are going to be covering the costs for all of the staff next year that need to do that. And you will still see some of this at a board meeting because it does have some impact on some other board policies around hiring practices. So this won't be the only time you hear about the Child Care Block Grant, but it does have an impact on our budget for next year too. So as I mentioned, here are the revenue sources that we have for next year. 25% of our budget is composed of state aid and local levy dollars based on funding formula established by the Minnesota State Legislature. As you can see, as I mentioned, 65% of our budget is made up of program fees, so that is the largest percentage of our budget. And then grants and other local sources, and the Pathway 1 and 2 early learning scholarships. Here it is just also in a pie graph. Just so I can explain what those other sources are, that would be things like the payment from the City of Northfield for our agreement for recreation programming. That is the most significant part of that piece of that pie. And then it's in there is also ad revenue from our brochure and a few other things. Our agreement with the City of Northfield for the recreation programming does expire at the end of next fiscal year, so starting next fall we've had a 3-year agreement for several years now with the city, so we will start engaging with them again next fall to talk about renewing that agreement. So then looking at the community services budget for fiscal year 19, we are projecting a fund balance at the end of this year of $677,685. Next year, revenues of $2,765,253, expenditures of $2,822,986, which does leave us with a negative fund balance of just under $58,000. We are doing that intentionally. We want to be able to try some of these things, especially in the areas of early learning, to see how they pan out and see what changes we see for students too. It does leave our projected fund balance at the end of next fiscal year at $619,952. Of course, there are some variables to this that we can't predict yet, and we will certainly bring those forward in revisions next year. Those being actual program enrollments, fee collection, and the grant funding. I also then wanted to share some, both the budget and a little bit of information about the Greenville Park Community School. Due to the federal grant, funds for the Greenville Park Community School are actually part of the general fund. Those grants are not allowed to be in the 04 fund. So as you can see what our funding for this year has been. So we're looking at just over $161,000 that has been part of the funding the Greenville Park Community School for this year. And then what we know to date is the school district's contribution and then our 21st Century Grant funding for next year. Next year is year 5 for our 21st Century Grant funding, which is how many years that we were hoping to have for that grant. So it will be a year to recompete. It's a highly competitive process. This last grant cycle that we were not a part of because we were still in this grant, they funded 1 in 5 applications. So we know it's a highly competitive grant cycle, but we will be excited to put in an application when that opens up. Typically, we should know about a year from now, so it would open up winter next year. Wanted to give you kind of an update what MDE is really, the standards we are held to in the MDE grant, and what they will look at when we go through this recompete grant process is really about our attendance. So they are really interested in how many students attend the Greenville Park Community School. Then what they're more interested in is how many attend 30 plus times, because that would be kind of the benchmark in out-of-school time programming where you're saying you're meeting that dosage to start making a difference in other areas. So even though this chart does say April 6th, partly we crossed our goals on April 6th, so I didn't, we are beyond our goals, but wanted to at least take a snapshot in time for you. So for both, as we're required by MDE, if they just come once, we just call them as trying the community school. So as an elementary student, you're considered enrolled in the community school if you came 6 or more times, so beyond that black bar and those that are green bars. So the total participation we've had is 490 students. That's almost all of Greenville Park has been there, and of course that's some students from some other schools too, but we have seen just great attendance numbers overall. As far as, like I said, what MDE is interested in is in 6 or more. We've seen 248 students that have attended 6 or more. We also include middle school and high school attendance. Their threshold is a little bit higher. They need to attend 11 or more times to count, and so as you can see, we've also had significant numbers there through April 6th. So just to give you an idea, our MDE goals are the ones first stated. So our MDE goal is that 175 Greenville Park students take part in activities. We've had as of April 6th, we had 248 Greenville Park students. That totals 323 if you include the middle school and high school. We needed 130 students to attend 70 plus times. On April 6th is when we crossed that number. So that has only increased since then. And then the number that they also for us track the number of students who've attended 30 plus times in that 5th grade and older. Any questions or comments?
As always, excellent, Erin. Questions, comments, board members have? Margaret.
You guys are amazing.
Thank you.
Hello. This just tells the story right there. And, I've watched it grow as my children grew, and you're amazing. So congratulations to you guys and again, carrying on the tradition of fiscal responsibility with amazing programming. We're very lucky to have that. My only question is, does MDE have rules about your fund balance like they do for the
Good question.
food service?
They no longer do.
Okay.
They did at one point. It was probably 4 or 5 years ago that they, 5 years ago that they have no longer. So there is not a cap on our fund balance.
Sweet. Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions?
So I'm curious with the Greenville Park Community School, I was talking to Dr. Hillman about when that grant runs out and thinking about sustainability. And do you have a sense of sort of which activities or strategies you want to persist and are really, you know, the ones that are holding on?
So that is part of our planning for this next year. So on June 6th, we are having a celebration breakfast with the staff at Greenville Park, which we've done the last couple, and the advisory council. And part of that is just for feedback, you know, what went great in this last year, and to share those highlights with them, and then also to share areas that we can improve and look to strengthen in the future year. And then we are required by MDE through that grant to have an advisory council. So we've had ongoing conversations with them, and we'll continue to have those about sustainability, and obviously with the staff of the community school, what would be most important, what areas, you know, if we don't receive any more funding, would we be able to continue, feel is the most important to continue. They're not 100% flushed out yet, Ellen, but those conversations are definitely taking place.
Other questions or comments? Rob?
I'm just wondering, what facilities other than the NCRC that are not owned by the district do you use? So you mentioned Emmaus and...
Yep, so basically we use every city park in Northfield and every city-owned facility. So the outdoor pool, the ice arena, any of those. We're in Emmaus, we're in Greenville, or we'll be in the library next year. And you know, we do some of our adult enrichment program. We do adult enrichment programs in probably, in a given year, probably 25 other locations in the community. So if you ever look in our community services brochure, it says a list of locations for that brochure, and it's usually about 15 locations long. Some are in Northfield and some are outside of Northfield. It just would depend on where, you know, we have horse classes that happen at different horse training facilities, rural Northfield. We have some art and painting classes that would happen in different studios, things like that. So some are public, some are private places as well.
For like using the ice rink, you have to pay the city of Northfield for the use of that. So I'm just wondering, like, with the money you get from the city and the money that you pay the city, I mean, what's the balance?
Sure. So, are you talking about what we receive in our recreation agreement?
Yeah.
So for example, for next fiscal year, we will receive about $129,000, and that is primarily for staffing costs, benefits and things that go with that. Then what we pay back to the city is in rental costs. So we pay some rent when we use the ice arena, which is where we run our Northfield skating school. So we pay rent back for that. We pay some rent when we do different swim programs at the outdoor pool. It's not equal to the amount that we would receive for the administration of the actual programming, but we are paying rental fees when we use different facilities.
Is that a lease aid type thing, or is that just part of this budget that's separate from other things that we lease?
That is just part of her budget.
Yeah.
So, yeah, because we don't have a formal lease with the city for the skating school.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
Amy?
I have the pleasure of being on her committee, so I've heard a lot of
She's heard this
before.
twice, is what she said.
But every time it amazes me of the depth and breadth of what our community services program does. So I want to thank you for all of the work. I don't know how you do it all, and all of your staff as well. I do have a comment about the 102,000 number. I mean, that seems amazing. That's like 2,000 people a week being involved. Do you have it? Can you?
Yep, that's actually even so different. It fluctuates, and it can fluctuate pretty significantly in years. So we hold political caucuses that especially on certain years, tends to really increase the number that we would have go through. We will see a dip in this next year. Canvas Church who has been a long time leaser of the high school on weekends, they have about 2 weeks left in our facility. So we will see a decrease next year in some of this. We'll see they are who's in our buildings on the weekends lots of times and on some of the holidays. So that will free up some of that, but we will also see a decrease in the number of people in the building sometimes too.
So even for that sort of thing where a different organization is coming in, you ask for how many people showed up that day?
We try, it's our best count. We do keep track because we are required, each year our department is required to report to MDE on numbers, and one of them would be community involvement numbers, and it specifically asks about those that if your community ed department is administering access to district facilities, that those numbers be tracked.
I would be curious sometime, just as we talk about the high school and stuff, to get some sense of how the high school is being used beyond just what the high school does.
The high school is heavily,
It's one of the buildings that was used every day, but
I just heard Joel sigh because I think I might be underestimating the heavy use that you might be thinking, but it is the building that is used it has the most use.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? I had one question and one comment. Question around facility usage fees. Have we reviewed that against other districts in the?
We have, yes. So we have
in the near future.
We have reviewed it. We a year and a half ago compared it with about 30 other districts in the with big 9 throughout this state in the metro area, rural. I think we will continue to see how work on the master facility plans and see where this best fits in to have a larger discussion about those two.
Okay, excellent. And then just wanted to, I think you alluded to it, but certainly not really recognizing, you're not recognizing, so we will, the amount of effort that you've had to do to really be creative around that Longfellow School, and just all of the things and the creative thinking that you've had to do, and there's a great strain there on space, and you're looking at it very optimistically and always looking at ways to do different things, but it's clearly an almost insurmountable challenge at this point. So just wanted to note that is very much appreciated, and we really understand the strain that has for staff and for you and for a community who want to utilize the programming in that building. Great. Thank you. Dr. Hillman.
yeah, I might have a couple things here.
Yeah.
So this is one of my favorite times of the year because we get to showcase our fantastic leaders, starting with the budget process and then going right into July into the school improvement program plans with our building principal. So very gratifying to see our outstanding leadership team getting to be shown off in front of you in the community. 21% fund balance, I did the math. Nice job, in terms of it. I think the important piece is that we know that community services programming is subject to the ups and downs of the economy, and so I'm happy that the state removed that fund balance cap because I think so many school districts had real trouble in that 2008-2009 timeframe. But again, great financial leadership. But even more important, I think we've seen a real shift in community services focus to looking at us as a pre-K-12 program. So if I ever write anything that says K-12, I get a note from Aaron saying, be K-12, making sure that we're doing that. And just to think about, we know that we cannot completely solve the achievement gap after it started. And our efforts to close it before it starts is really important. So for the first time ever, to our knowledge, we're going to spend some general fund money on a community services program with the EL preschool. We'll be funding the EL teacher who's part of that. That is a direction I will tell you is going to happen more and more if we're really serious about stopping that achievement gap before it starts. The pre-K leadership that Aaron has demonstrated is nothing short of fantastic. People sometimes look at us as competing with other local pre-Ks. We're not competing with them, we are leading them because we've established something this year we called the Pre-K Exchange. Teachers from Sibley Elementary actually visited several community preschools, and those community preschool directors came to Sibley to see what is it like in a kindergarten class, again, trying to help align some of those standards, align some of those various things. We have established basically the Northfield area preschool directors group, which I've had a chance to attend a number of times. You know, very few of them are parent aware rated, so they can't take the state scholarships. So Aaron asked, what are the hurdles? They told us what the hurdles are. Aaron is solving those hurdles. People would look at, oh, those are your competitors. No, all of those kids end up in Northfield schools at the end. We don't care where you're at, we're going to help you. We are going to be leading, helping other preschools get the parent aware rating so they can get those dollars that Aaron mentioned before. In addition, very few local preschools are able to take the CCAP dollars because the bureaucracy is, and I've shared this with our legislatures, the CCAP dollar bureaucracy, it might be the origination of the word red tape, which we know it's not, but it is very difficult for people who need to, the dollars assigned to people or available for people, many of the people cannot navigate the system. And $240,000 was left on the table in Rice County alone this year that was designated to serve low-income families so their kids could have a high-quality preschool experience. Aaron asks, what are the hurdles? People say it, Aaron says, we will fix it. And we have fixed it. And so, well, we have a plan to fix it.
We're working on it.
So my point is, this is about Northfield Public Schools programming, but the leadership that we're providing to the other community services or the other community preschools is exactly what we have in our vision statement about commitment to community partnerships, and that is all Erin's leadership. And the respect and the credibility that she has with that preschool directors group allows us to get it done. So again, thrilled. Great job.
Thank you.
Excellent. Any last questions or comments?
I'd like to know, Matt, that CCAP money that you're mentioning in Rice County, is that a use it or lose it, or is it still sitting there for?
We're not sure. Are
I'm
we?
not 100% sure. I've had several conversations with Mark Shaw, who's the director of Rice County Social Services. I think it goes back into the general fund, although I'm not 100% sure. But they were awarded more money, so we know they underspent last year. They were actually awarded more money for this next fiscal year. So he is becoming more engaged and committed into figuring out how the best to access it. It's a complicated system, and so people need support and help when trying to figure that out.
Thank you.
Yep.
Can I just ask one last question? I had written the 21st Century Community Learning Center grant. When you reapply for that, how rigorous of a process is that? Is it a pretty onerous effort to get that grant pulled together?
It's a big grant. So the end document will probably be about 60 to 65 pages. It's a pretty big document to, at least I should say that's what it was 4 years ago. It's a lot to pull together. You need to show, and some of it will look different under ESSA versus under No Child Left Behind, so I'm not 100% sure what that'll look like, but you need to, kind of show that you are meeting all of those different standards that they're asking you to meet in 21st century programming.
Is that likely to include a site visit? If we're maybe finalists?
Yeah, so typically we will have a site visit next year, we know for sure. And so we have done well in this grant. They've pushed our site visits at times. So we will, I'm sure, absolutely have both a desk audit and a site visit next year.
Excellent.
And when they come, they review it, we have to keep track. There's a very large binder that we have to keep track of everything, and then they will sit and review that as well.
Okay, excellent. Well, and we all know Dr. Hillman, thank you very much for everything and the amazing work you do and your staff as well.
Thank you.
All right. So we now have a presentation, the high school flexible schedule update by Northfield High School Principal Joel Weir. Welcome, Joel.
That's Well, good evening, everybody. And I have to say into the microphone, everybody hear that Erin said they keep everything organized in a really big binder. It's 2018 and keeping everything organized in a really big binder.
He said MDE does actually require you. It's not our
Get out.
The more things
Well, it's
change.
actually 4 binders currently, because there's about a binder, but I told Bill.
Sorry.
It wasn't my job. It
Not a
wasn't my
flash
pick.
drive?
No, it wasn't my pick to keep it in the binder, but that I am required to have it in the binder.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to share the planned flex period with you tonight. Some of you may be familiar with a game called the 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, which is essentially the game with the suggestion that in 6 steps you can get from anything to a connection to Kevin Bacon. And so I'm going to take you through just a couple of steps that seem initially unrelated to one another that really get us to where we are in terms of this flex period idea. The interesting thing is that it starts in multiple places. Now we as public school educators sometimes have a lot of great ideas happening in a lot of different places, and sometimes they will move parallel and never join together. And then eventually we realize that, boy, this would be much more efficient if we were doing these in a concerted effort. So I will take you back in time to 2 years ago when one of the high school PLCs was looking at, believe it or not, how do we get more members of underserved populations in advanced coursework? And that really was point A of this discussion that leads us to the flex period, because a group of staff were concerned about the underrepresentation. And so we began looking at some intentional ways to get students, more students on that underrepresented list into those classes. So to some extent, we've begun to decrease the gap in the percentage of students that we have across our demographic and those that are participating in the advanced coursework. One of the byproducts of that process was that some of the first-time advanced course students we were seeing increased stress levels in those students because they were being pushed in ways they hadn't previously been pushed. They were a little bit out of their comfort zone. And so that same group of teachers who was working with those students was saying, well, we need to come up with a solution to this. And so at point A, this dialogue about how do we build in some support time during the course of our school day to help students get the support they need to be successful in those classes, particularly those first-time students in those advanced courses. A second point of origin was the discussion around career and college readiness. So an initiative that you have asked us to implement at the high school. A team was put together in late fall to begin looking at how we were going to implement our career and college readiness curriculum for our students 9 through 12. The team met for the better part of a month and a half and designed a schedule that would incorporate 1 day a week. We never used this term, but an advisory-like period where we would deliver that curriculum. That team brought that conversation back to the staff at large, and the feedback we got from that process really made us kind of look back to that process and say, well, maybe that isn't the best method. What are some other ways that we could potentially deliver it? Thirdly, the third point of origin was the conversation about social emotional learning and the need to really begin to address those issues in our high school, and really, other than anecdotally and informally and maybe even accidentally, weren't really a thrust of our improvement plan or moving forward in a way that was going to address those needs. So conversations were occurring around this idea of how do we support first-time advanced coursework students, how do we implement career and college readiness, and how do we support students on a social emotional level. So 3 different conversations happened to be the lightning struck, and everybody knew that the other conversations were taking place, and it funneled into this team that began looking at, is it time for us to look at an alternative schedule, a new schedule for the high school that would allow us to provide students that opportunity. So in December, we sent an email out to, or I sent an email out to our, the Principals Association has essentially a ask the state a question. And so we crafted a question about a flex period, a recess break, if you will. And I use that very purposefully with quotation marks because some schools think of it truly like that. But that was never our intent. It was to look at some system of support. So we had a number of responses back. We found that about 30 secondary schools across the state are using some form of a flex period. And so that was really the birth of this discussion. So a team has been working now over the last few months to develop a schedule that we took to staff, and the staff voted to approve both the schedule itself as well as the implementation of ramp up to readiness. our career and college readiness curriculum that will be built into that period. So these are the goals, and every agenda, every handout, every email, everything that we do related to this flex period has these goals and objectives as part of it, because we wanted to make sure that every stakeholder knew exactly why we were moving forward with the change, rather than thinking of it as change for change's sake. And so building and fostering relationships, creating more balance in everyone's day, reducing the hectic rat race, provide a means to implement college and career readiness, as I mentioned, and then provide equity and access to academic supports for students. And so these became kind of have been the cornerstone of all of the discussions related to what our school day could look like if it looked different to accomplish these goals. So, as I mentioned, over 30 schools statewide have implemented something similar. And these are the four kind of main themes that schools who have been doing this for a year or two, or in some cases longer, have said were positive responses, positive reactions of their school community. Student stress decreased, behavior issues decreased, the school climate, students spoke about a more positive school climate, and then just spoke to the fact that every student, regardless of their socioeconomic or how busy they are or how many jobs they have, or how they get to school, or any other struggles, had equal access to those opportunities for school support, for chill time, for reteaching, for just a chance to de-stress and function in a way that was a little more healthy, a little less hectic across the board. So what we came up with, and I know you have this page in your packet, is the daily schedule that will allow us after the fourth hour to build in an hour-long flex period. Now, some people think we're doing things with mirrors when we've pulled only 3 minutes from each class and turned it into an hour in the middle of the day. Well, the truth of the matter is, one of the banes of my existence as a building leader is the academic lunch combination. So when you have those two things that are interwoven together, you have limitations in terms of what you can do with a shortened schedule, with a late start, with an early out, with a pep fest day, and those types of things. So one of the pieces that's an unintentional benefit from the standpoint of the curriculum programs is that each of the classes will always be the same length. So if you are Mr. Eddie in the math department and you teach the same class third hour and fourth hour, this year, with our late starts for snow, with our Pep Fest days, with our late starts on Wednesday, you have a significant reduction in the amount of instructional time for the third hour class that you don't see in the fourth hour. So there can develop pretty significant imbalance. So that's one of the side benefits that we see from this as well. So the flex hour will be 1 hour that will include lunch. So really we've essentially pulled about a half hour's worth of time from the academic periods across the day, added it to lunch, took lunch out of the academic portion of the day, so students truly have an hour in between fourth hour academic experience and their fifth hour academic experience. During that time, they will move for 10 minutes, stay put for 20, move for 10, stay put for 20, and that will make up the hour. Now, if you think about it in 4 chunks, so 10, 20, 10, 20, my child nutrition colleagues behind me here have been just incredible in the way that they have approached the idea of saying, wait a minute, you're giving us less time to serve kids. There's some obstacles there, but let's see what we can do in terms of making that work. So students will essentially have 4 options for how they do their lunch. They can grab their lunch in that first 10 minutes and find some place in the building to do an activity, to hang out with friends, to get some exercise, to work on homework, to get academic support. They can come to the lunchroom and use that first 20-minute chunk for a more relaxing lunch period. So they would be in the cafeteria. They can use the second 10-minute time if they've been out in the building for the first half. They can come then get their lunch the second half of the hour-long flex period and go off into the building again. Or they can think of it as a traditional lunch bee, if you will. So really there are 4 avenues where kids could be getting their lunch, and then multiple places where they could be eating it. We will be opening the building, and that'll be kind of a fundamental shift of how we approach lunch and food and waste. We're going to depend on the kids to be responsible with making sure that their things get thrown away in appropriate containers. But we will have places throughout the building where teachers have the autonomy to determine if they're willing to let kids bring their lunch to an academic support area or to an activity area where they can be eating as well as getting some additional support. So this first pilot week that we're going to do next week, that will be kind of a lead into the fall implementation, will really be an experiment for all of the students and all of the staff in the building. If you are free during this time period at any given day next week, certainly feel free to come over and see how it looks. We are anticipating a learning experience for all of us with some glitches and certainly some obstacles. But we're also hoping to see kind of a burst of opportunity from the different things that we're going to have happening during those time periods. All right. Oh, sorry. I covered that. And so what will be available? And it's almost easier to answer this question from the standpoint of what won't be available. Because we really want staff and students to drive the opportunities that they're going to have access to. So obviously we don't cease being an academic institution for this hour. Kids are going to be able to do their homework. Kids are going to be able to get academic support. And you're familiar with our battery of MTSS opportunities. Those will all be alive and well and thriving during this hour as well. But students will also have an opportunity to decompress a little bit. One of the biggest knocks on our schedule, which Matt, I believe you said has been in place for 41 years.
I was in 6th grade the last time it was changed.
So maybe it's due for an experiment to try something new. But we are hoping that it can be all things to all kids. We did send out an informational video. Our LOA students did some instructional videos that we're going to be sending over the course of the week to students to kind of introduce them to what's happening in our building during a flex period. And kind of the last line of today's video was, but it's not a free-for-all. And there is definite structure to the looseness of the flex period. It is not meant to be, run around. That's why we've been very intentional about following the model that we saw at Centennial, where students will have 10 minutes, like I said, to move or get their lunch and go someplace. And then that 20 minutes, kids aren't going to be mobile unless the actual activity itself is mobile. So maybe they're walking with a teacher who's leading a walking activity. That could be outside on a nice day, inside on a inclement weather day. So we want to make sure that it is as much as possible all things to all kids so they get what they need. One of the things that confounded me momentarily when we visited Centennial was talking with the students after just having been introduced to the idea by the principal talking about decompression, de-stress, relaxation, chill time, all of these kind of non-academic things. First 3 students I ran into spend the whole time every day doing their homework. I said, well, that kind of defeats the purpose, doesn't it? And all 3 of them were like, you've got to be kidding me. Then I don't have to do it later. And now I have an hour after dinner where I can just sit and do whatever. And so those kids have taken the opportunity to say, you know what, I'm not going to take my break now, but I'm going to intentionally open up a spot later in the day. If I'm an athlete, if I work, whatever the case might be, open up another slot in their day. And we want students to feel that option as well. So definite structure. It's not a free-for-all, but we also want to have, really maximize the number of choices that they have access to, up to and including looking very much academic like any other period of the day would. All right, and changes that are coming in short-term and long-term. Looking at some flexible spaces, and by flexible spaces we mean things like taking as an example, a classroom that we typically think of tradition with 6 rows of 5 where 30 kids sit or 36 kids sit, and turning that room into something that looks a little more like a lounge space, academic furniture, where students can be engaged and attentive, but at a moment's notice it can turn into a space that can be a little more relaxed. Jim Kulseth and I have walked the building, and members of the team that has been pursuing this model have looked at spaces that you've walked by thousands of times, and we're suddenly saying, well, we could put some cool furniture here, or we could maybe move that wall or take those doors off. And so we're beginning to look at things a little more, not a little more creatively, but we're beginning to look at things a little creatively from that standpoint. Again, not that we're trying to turn the high school into a lounge, but to have spaces where kids can feel a little more comfortable. If your children, when they do homework or when they did homework, are like mine, they're tilted halfway upside down, and they're on the floor, and they're laying around, and they're reclined in many different positions. So we want to try to replicate that at least a little bit, and to give them some spaces where they can feel comfortable doing whatever activities they choose to. Redesigning some classrooms, we've had a couple of teachers who said, listen, turn my space into a flex space. I'll teach there, and then it can be a flexible space during the flex hour. And then, like I said, food on the move is going to be kind of a work in progress, and then an improved community. So we're going to be intentional about some of those things, and really believe that based on already on the feedback we've heard from parents just about hearing the idea, and also from students. I heard this could be a game changer. This is a great idea. And one mom offered to hug everyone involved in the decision. So it's definitely something I think that people, I didn't say we were going to do that. I said that one mom was offering that. But definitely something that could be, like I said, a game changer. And I was witnessing the Festival of Compliments for my colleagues in community services and child nutrition. I certainly can say that for this specific project, buildings and grounds and child nutrition have been amazing. We kind of sat in this little room and came up with this idea and started to run with it and went and visited Centennial, and we're like, well, this is a great idea. Well, we have to tell some people that are really important to this process. And so Stephanie and then Cece, our high school food service manager, acknowledging the challenges, have really been involved at the table to say, how can we make this work? How can we problem solve? And so I think it's been a good, and will be an ongoing conversation as we begin to examine. And one of the challenges that we have to acknowledge that food service has 90 minutes to serve lunch, and in the flex they'll have 60. That's significant. And so those are the types of things that when we talk about the experiment, beginning to look at how our entities work together. Buildings and grounds with the number of garbage cans that will need to be out in the building so that kids are getting rid of their food garbage and other things in the right places. That'll be a challenge. And so we're going to look at those, like I said, this next week is the Noble experiment, and then how does that inform how we make this week look as we move to implementation in the fall. So, and there you go. And again, these things happen because we have leadership like you folks who kind of say, you know what, brainstorm a little bit, see what you can do in the buildings of our district to make things better for kids. So thank you for that trust and willingness to agree even when it might look a little bit chaotic.
Excellent. This is really, really exciting stuff, and I know board members will have questions and comments. So,
Yeah, please.
those who have questions, comments? Margaret?
That's a great idea. I mean, and you think lunchtime is a stressful time normally, so this is great. I'm having trouble wrapping my head around the idea of how you're going to get all those kids through a line. I mean, what if they all show up right at 11:11?
You bet. Great question. So, even two answers.
Okay.
It doesn't answer the question necessarily because it is going to be,
Just helps
we're
me.
going to have to wait and see a little bit.
Yeah.
But for the initial pilot week next week, we're going to actually guide certain groups of kids to say, come at this time, come at this time. We'll continue open lunch for seniors during this pilot week. So in theory, this won't happen because a lot of our seniors eat lunch here. But if seniors were to all disappear, we're looking at being very intentional about telling the 9th graders when they should come, when the 10th graders should come, and then we're going to split the juniors in half. So our best hope is that every single student listens. But it's going to be one of those things where I think part of it will be an education for the kids to say, if I'm hungry and I really need to eat and I really need to get to these two areas where I want to get some academic support and I also want to play volleyball for a few minutes to shake my sillies out, I'm going to dart and I'm going to get my food right away. For other students who, you know, they're going to be, I hope, Stephanie and I have talked about too, some possibilities of doing some flexible furniture in the cafeterias themselves, making that a really appealing place to kick back. It's already an appealing place from the standpoint of kids get to hang out with their friends and socialize and obviously eat. But to have places that are a little more relaxed, maybe open up some spaces a little bit. So there will be plenty of students, as there were in Centennial when we visited in Forest Lake, that would spend 30 minutes there. And you know, if they want to spend 30 minutes with their friends eating lunch and maybe doing a little homework, that's fine.
And is the idea that sounds great to me. I'm still thinking they're all gonna, the thundering herd is all gonna show up at 11:11, but that's not my concern. Is it? My other thought is, are we gonna try to include some outdoor spaces to eat when the weather is nice?
We are, yeah. In fact, we're starting next week with a couple of easy access spaces. So outside the auditorium entrance, for example.
Okay. Yeah.
We've been in touch with the fire marshal, who has kind of given us an understanding of what we need to do to this courtyard right behind you to make that an outdoor space.
Okay.
I mean, it's already an outdoor space, but make it usable.
Useful. Yeah.
And it's actually something, and again, Jim Colseth, that was one of those situations where he said, well, what do we have to do? Rather than saying, you know, can we? He said, if we, you know, what are the things we have to do to be able to do that? So, so we're going to be very intentional about that, as well as having activities that are going on outside.
Yeah.
So, we could call it recess on the football practice field. So maybe have a game of soccer, a game of, you know, really anything and everything. So to some extent, staff will initiate the process of saying, here's what's available, but certainly within we're gonna gather feedback from students and say, hey, which of these things were you interested in? What other types of things would you like to see? And they'll also, as Dr. Hillman has made famous in these parts, vote with their feet. You know, so if a staff member offers an interest that isn't of interest, then they'll alter that interest or talk to kids and say, hey, what would bring you here?
I think this sounds wonderful. Kudos to the team. Absolutely. Thank you.
Amy. I have several questions. First of all, I think this sounds very exciting. I just want to say that I love the idea behind it. I just have some questions about some of the details and how.
So do we.
So I love the thought that the kids can get outdoor time, because I think getting out in nature, even if it's just outside of the building, is very important. But I also know that school safety is a hot topic.
Yeah.
And if the kids are using more of the doors going in and out, how does that affect keeping the school safe?
Sure, great question. So I'll give you one specific example. So the auditorium entrance, where the kids will be able to go outside and turn immediate right to that little grassy area that's to the south side of the theater. We'll have a teacher assigned to that door. We're not going to be opening up access to doors more than we already have. I mean, so if you were to go outside, you're still going to be coming in door one. But students who go out there for lunch, there will be a supervisor immediately outside the door that can be letting kids in and out. Well, they can get out on their own, but let them in. So all entries will remain supervised just as they are now. Outdoor spaces, like I said, if we were on the practice field for recess, there will be an adult there. And we can talk, kind of further details about, should people outside have two-way radios communicating with the main office. We're certainly not going to neglect the idea of safety. At the same time, I think that we also recognize some opportunities to build climate that really necessitates us to look at what are some opportunities, what are some possibilities with outdoor spaces. And if we're able to, create outdoor spaces in controlled environments like the courtyard, for example, there will be less of a necessity to look kind of beyond that. But we really envision, the whole school campus as being, potential spaces to be used.
I think that's great. I don't want you to operate out of fear. I love how you're looking at how you can solve the problems and make kids continue to be safe and still get outside and get some fresh air. I have more questions.
Can I just point out too that it's going to be no different than when this time of the year our physical education classes are going outside every day. I mean, so if you're walking by right now, you'll see. So I think we already have a strategy for considering school safety as well as using the external part of the facility So I wanted to tie that in, that it's not gonna be something new. We have, kids going out multiple times a day once it gets nice, so we already have some strategies to work through that. I don't apologize for everybody, I just wanted to make that FIAD connection.
No, that's great. So when do the teachers have lunch?
One side or the other,
So
essentially.
it'll be the same hour. So
Exactly.
they'll have it during the flex hour, and then the other half, the flex hour, most likely they'll be doing something,
Yep.
offering something?
So Teachers Week, if you think about, I know I just said that there are 4 parts to the flex hour, but if you think about them in 2 30-minute cycles, so the 10 and the 20 together, 10 and 20 together, one half of that will, one of those 20-minute periods, 25-minute periods really, will be a teacher's lunch each day. So really the teacher then has something other than lunch the other half. And so they've been at, one of those hours will be our career college readiness curriculum starting in the fall. We're not going to do the CCR for the pilot week, but that will be implemented then when we start in the fall. So they have essentially those 5 other times. And so teachers are identifying certain periods for interests. And by interest, that would include things like science help. So the science department has kind of worked through a plan to say, we're going to offer science help every day, but it's going to be a different teacher each day. So Ms. Saxton West might have science help on Monday, Mr. Weeby on Tuesday, and so on. And then teachers will also do, I think of Mr. Coudray, will probably head right down to the music area to do informal jam band. Got to say that correctly. So kids who want to bust out their instruments and make some, music can do that as well. So staff, like I said, for this first pilot week, really are in charge of kind of designing, what those interests, what those areas of support are going to be that are opposite their lunches. And then I didn't mention one of those 5 remaining that isn't a lunch is a general supervision period. So we basically have gotten it down to the point where if all of the adults in the building do one supervision, we can cover the building in terms of supervisory for the cafeteria, the gymnasium, the auxiliary the weight room, the upper balcony, outside areas, some hallway supervision. And so that's all covered with the number of adults we have.
Great, and everybody gets to eat.
And everybody gets to eat for maybe even a little bit longer than they're used to.
So I was wondering if for next year you've thought about how to keep the different opportunities from competing too much with each other. So I'm thinking there might be the student activities could meet one day, and maybe, college and career readiness could meet another day or something. So I guess would hate to see all the activities meeting every single day and then the kids never get to college and career readiness. And I'm not sure I have an answer for that, but I'm just worried a little bit about the types of different activities ending up competing with each other.
Well, I can speak to the college and career readiness piece is going to be that's a piece that's very intentionally scheduled so that all kids get it. So for example, the model we're currently looking at would have 9th and 10th graders doing their college and career on a Tuesday, 9th and 10th, 11th and 12th on Thursday. So college and career readiness is a curriculum that will be delivered to all students. And really that was, like I said, one of the 4 key purposes of pursuing this schedule. So that won't be in competition with anything. In terms of kind of what the interests and support opportunities that will be available to kids, really it's going to be kind of a response to their popularity and also to their need. So if we have a lot of students needing science support during that time, we may look at, well, let's increase the number of offerings. If we have a student offering, Ms. Saxton West is looking at offering TED Talks, a selection of TED Talks on a given day. If one student trickles down there every other week, then that's going to be a good indication that maybe that there are things out there that are of more interest to kids. But in terms of kind of competing, I guess I don't see, if we get into a situation where students are saying, oh, I want to do, these 2 things are colliding somehow, then we're certainly ready to monitor and adjust. And we really see certainly the pilot week, but even the first weeks of the fall are going to be very much an experiment, just to see how we settle in. And really what we heard from particularly Centennial, the model that most closely looks like we're rolling out next week, kids develop a pattern. So they might go to the same room every Monday, or they might do the same activity on certain days. The one piece that we're being very intentional, purposeful, and careful about is how we build in things like student groups that currently are meeting at other times of the day, so Wednesday morning before late start, or after school, or at other times when sometimes it's inconvenient for kids because of transportation, because of work, because of activities. And we're not necessarily against having all of those things moved into the flex period, but we just want to be very intentional about making sure that we don't take away all of the benefits we intend to provide the kids before we even get to it. So if you're on Mayor's Youth Council and National Honor Society and rattling off all of these great things, if they all move their outside meetings to that period, then you'll have students who Monday through Friday are
And that's exactly
tied up, so.
what my worry was, so I'm glad you're being very intentional about that.
And one of the things that we have said for sure for the pilot week, but I think that the committee that has kind of planned it feels very strongly about is the idea of no reward and no penalty. So if I show up for a meeting, like for example, if LOA were to offer a training session, that if kids show up, they don't receive a reward or an extra benefit because they're there and someone else isn't, or the kids who don't show up aren't penalized for that. So we really want to instill that this is other than than the academic setting, and it's an opportunity for kids to take ownership of what they need during that time.
Can the kids sit in the cafeteria for the whole hour?
Sure.
Okay. And then my last question, at least for now, but probably last. As a parent, I'm a little bit worried about the shortening of the passing time because the high school is already very maze-like, and I know it's not unusual for the students to need all 5 minutes to get from the art to the history wing, and if they have to take a restroom break, it's nearly impossible. So for them to lose a minute just concerns me. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts are and how you came to decide to take a minute out of the
Sure,
class.
great question. So we, really the anecdotal evidence, and I want to stress anecdotal, is that virtually all of our students are where they are going in the first 4 minutes of passing time. It is a maze and it is a long building, but once kids establish kind of that rhythm of how they get from point A to point B, from second to third to fourth hour, we feel confident that by and large, once those kids establish the rhythm, they're able to get there. But again, just as all the other pieces of this are going to be, we really see that as an experiment as well. And the reduction in passing time really came from kind of a question that was posed as a result of when we were in discussion about the original model of the schedule had kids apparating from the flex period to the next period. There was no passing time. So literally, flex time ended at the same time the next period started. So our initial build just said, wow, this will be easy. Let's take 5 minutes away from the flex period. And not, of course, thinking that we're already challenging food service with an hour delivery time. Now we're taking more time away. And I'm going to turn to Stephanie to make sure I have this number right, but 7 minutes, we serve 300 students. Is that right?
Yeah.
So if you figure we take 5 minutes away, that's pretty significant when we can serve 300 students in 7 minutes. And I say we as if I have anything to do with it.
You will.
I will, yes, exactly. Speaking of the hairnet. So Stephanie and Cece and Jim joined the table when obviously that challenge became a greater concern, and even further reducing it to make up that passing time. And so we talked about possible solutions, and really what the staff said that was on part of that committee was if we cut it to 4 and kids are able to move that quickly, their broader concern was reducing that break time in between period 1 and 2 and 2 and 3. And we thought that the trade-off of having an hour in the middle of the day was at least worth trying. And if we have if we have 250 kids who are tardy because they can't get, across the building in that amount of time, then absolutely we're going to reconsider that. That would not be something we would say, well, just start running. It is all part of this, the experiment, and we're going to look for ways. But we also wanted to, there is a maximum amount of reduction that we can do to providing kids, food during the middle of the day, during a lunch period. There is we haven't defined the tipping point, but there's a point at which parents, students, and staff would say, well, we can't cut more time from class periods. We're pretty pleased with the fact that we are able to come up with an hour with just a 3-minute reduction from those classes. So we have to be creative a little bit, but right now we're going to give that our best shot.
Thank you.
Other questions? No.
This room has heard this expression quite often, but the road to success is always under construction. And that is true, but Dr. Lear, I'm sorry, did I accelerate your career a little bit? Mr. Lear, thank you so much for your presentation. To make changes, I believe leaders need to let their guard down. So thank you for your leadership.
You're welcome.
As always, well said, no. Jeff?
Being a long time ago, I went to school here for 3 years. Coming from the V wing to get to the H wing takes some time. I was a little bit late sometimes. We had about 4 minutes back in the day. It can be kind of a stretch sometimes. One of my questions was, when you talked to Centennial, did you get, during that period, did they mention kids trying to skip out or shenanigans going on, or was that a problem, or were they pretty disciplined or liked the privilege?
Yeah, the last of those, that they really liked the privilege. I have no doubt there were kids, entertained by their own shenanigans in some capacity. Centennial is an interesting campus if you know it, because it's actually 2 buildings that are connected, that are on the same, essentially the same piece of land, and connected by nothing other than an outdoor walkway. And so their flex period, actually, their doors are open, like unlocked from the outside. So kids are moving not only within a building, but they're moving from building to building. So there is a lot of, their structure is structured, don't get me wrong, it is not a free-for-all there either. In fact, we visited another school that was lamenting how loose they had initially designed theirs, and they were really trying to rein it back in. Centennial's is very structured, and we liked that within the confines of this idea of, the loose, tight, if you will. But kids are on the move there, and like I said, they're moving between 2 buildings that are 100 feet apart. Doors are open, but staff are on the move too. They've got people in the hallways, and the administration's out moving around. And so we're really, we're going to be enlisting all of the adults in the building across this flex period to make sure students are getting their needs fulfilled. But, we're not going to turn a blind eye to the possibility that kids may want to, take advantage of it. Our hope is that we offer things that are engaging and supportive enough that will be a minor issue at best.
And to Amy's point on the enhanced, ideas around security for that period. So I don't know if there's any changes or heightened awareness.
If we can have a more heightened awareness, it's already pretty heightened.
Okay.
I would say that it's on the minds of our staff, if not all the time, certainly many, many times during the course of the day. But we will certainly be diligent to maintain those pieces that we put in place that we feel make the building as safe as possible, as well as, and one of the things we talked about is building and fostering relationships. We see this as another opportunity to increase our connections with kids, so that they're making good decisions, they're making positive decisions, and they're getting help when they need it.
Well, the paradigm always deserves to be challenged, so I encourage you to move forward and take a shot at it. I think the logistics for lunch is an increased perspective, but every change is a challenge. But I think that behavior and consequences, the kids like that, they get a little bit more flex time in there as long as they're responsible. I think it's a good idea.
Thank you.
Ellen.
So yeah, philosophically, I think this is fantastic. I'm just curious about just have a couple questions on the details. So you started with that one of the 3 sort of founding ideas that led to this was the broadening access to advanced courses. Can you help me understand how this is going to be used as that strategy?
Well, so the conversation that came out of, I mean, the flex period won't work to increase access. So the flex period was kind of this idea that PLC came up with, was to say that when we're exposing students to this higher level of rigor in these advanced courses, those students who are relatively new to that level of rigor are needing additional supports. And a lot of the research that talks about, closing that opportunity gap for marginalized students in advanced coursework speaks to the idea of, you don't just put them in there, you provide this mechanism to support them so they can be successful. Because if they are in there and they are taking the test, even if they're not having great success, those things are going to benefit them throughout high school, but also going to increase their potential to persevere through higher ed. So it's not necessarily working in reverse, but what we're saying is that getting students in those opportunities is creating for them this kind of sense of alarm to say, okay, I don't have enough time for this increased rigor, I'm stressed out. And so now we are responding with this flex piece to say, we want to leave you there, you're going to be successful, and here are the support mechanisms we're going to put into place. And one of them is going to be available, not one of them, but one option will be the opportunities you have for the flex period. Some students just need time to get their work done, because when they leave here, the last thing they have time for is their homework. But homework continues to be a reality. So, that will give them a chance to, some students will drop out of an advanced course because they're going to take care of a sibling, or they're going to work, or, whatever item pulls them away. And so if we can give kids an opportunity, one, to access help, reteaching, academic support, or just time to get their work done, then I think we're going to win. And that's how that comes back to that piece.
Yes, sure.
And then knowing that this is an experiment and thinking about next year, the next week will be an experiment, but how will the communications with the parents and the students and the staff, like as the experiment evolves, you'll run into roadblocks and things will, are there, do you have like advisory that you're meeting every so often to say, okay, what's working, what's not? Let's get back to the parents on the, it just seems like that's the downside of having something so developmental is just making sure that everybody's on the same page, so that it seems like that's where things can fall apart, where the actual thing was great, but it was just something with communications that...
Sure, yeah. Well, our intention certainly is to be copious with our communication, but the team that has essentially created the schedule and kind of created a plan will certainly be involved through the pilot, and then in the days and weeks after the pilot to say, okay, how does this inform then, or how do we adjust? How does it intensify the rollout in the fall? This teaching staff is committed to college and career readiness and the flex period for 2 years. And then officially for 2 years, and then we'll officially revisit it. But certainly during that time, we've said that, we'll be reviewing it frequently. And if that's a matter of some summertime revisions or adjustments on the fly, we can do that. And I want to be clear too that, when I talk about an experiment, we have a hypothesis. I mean, we're not going in to say, hey, let's just see what happens with this kind of haphazard plan. It's been very, deeply thought out in the process, but, examining, potential pitfalls. One example of that, I'm not too proud to say that the conversation with food service and buildings and grounds came later than it should have. Those are the types of learnings that we as the leaders of the committee, and also just the committee at large, has said, hey, we got to remember to keep that in mind. Even after, Stephanie and Cece and Jim had visited Centennial, we had heard from the food service people and buildings and grounds people there. We had talked with our people here, and yet we arbitrarily removed 5 minutes from the flex period, and we had to think, oh wait, well, and we didn't think until Stephanie said, hold on a second, and so then we had to revisit that. So those are the types of things I imagine as part of the ongoing experiment, but we really feel like the planfulness to this point will have us doing little tweaking to the effect rather than saying, oh, holy mackerel. And a big part of that is going to be that that it's not, like I said, it's not just it's not an hour-long recess where kids are just all over the place. They'll be all over the place, but in a structured format.
Other questions? Rob?
It's not really a question, it's just that we hear a lot of new initiatives that are brought up, MTSS, SEL, et cetera, all these acronym things, which are all great for students, but I think this is really exciting because it's something where the appeal is much more easy to understand and it supports all those other things, but I just think, maybe it's cynical to say from a public relations standpoint, it's really good because it supports all the things you're trying to do, but it just, feels good to everybody. And so I just want to say I'm really, really happy that you're doing this, and I'm not going to hug you.
I'm glad for both of those.
Great. Any last minute questions or comments? I just had one question. How will you measure, the effectiveness of this for students? Is there a plan to do some surveying students and staff, or how will
that was almost like a plant. We are doing the social emotional inventory on Wednesday. It's a survey that we've done before in the fall, but the SEI is actually this word always sounds so negative, canned, but it's a pre-designed. We're not creating all of the questions, but within the confines of the survey, we're allowed some freedom to add some questions. And so the questions that we're adding to the SEI for Wednesday include baseline data questions related to climate and stress and those social emotional themes that'll be a part of that. So, and I credit Carrie Duba for spearheading that, because we had asked the question, well, actually I take that back. Teachers had asked the question in our discussions about this rollout, what's the research behind doing this? And in talking with the folks in Centennial, they talked about, well, anecdotally we've heard this. And those two pieces really kind of steered us into say, well, this feels really good, but we can't do it just because it feels really good. And so we need to have some sort of guide that says, at what point do we say, okay, it's not working, it is working, how well it's working. And also, there will be points where we say, is this component of it worth the challenge? Or this component is worth the challenge. So we're open to all of those things. But thanks for asking that question, because that survey is going to be a big component of kind of that before-after analysis.
Okay, excellent. I think we've had, again, we'll probably have more questions and comments as things move forward. We're really excited to have you back and to hear how this rolls out. I commend you for how far you've come, and eyes wide open, you realize there's challenges ahead, but you have come really, really far with this, and I echo board member sentiment. It's just really, really exciting. Cool. So thank you to you, your leadership, and everyone who was part of the process. It was really an inclusive process, and it really led to this coming to fruition, and strong support from the staff. So it's really good stuff.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you. I want to just take a moment to ask if board members are interested in taking a 5 or 10 minute recess. We do have a number of agenda items to continue to move forward, but I'm wondering if people want to just maybe stretch for, I would entertain a motion if that's something people would want to do. Margaret?
I will move that we take a 5-minute break.
Okay, excellent.
Recess.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Noel. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we will reconvene at
Rob just said this is our flex time.
Yes. We will reconvene at
Catch me, I'll give
9:20 p.m. So we are officially in recess, and we'll reconvene at 9:20 p.m. Meeting back to order. We are reconvening at 9:21 p.m. Dr. Hillman, our next item for discussion and report is proposed 2018-19 student handbooks, of which we were all given copies in our packets.
Yes, in fact, we
Go for it,
do
Dr.
think it
Hillman.
might be a record packet, but So what I just wanted to share with you tonight is if you know the history behind how we have approved student handbooks, usually you've been asked to approve them at the June board meeting, and that's the same meeting that you are presented with the changes. And so what we have done based upon board feedback over the last 2 years is we are now at a point where you're getting all of the handbooks in their entirety, just like you might see a modified contract, and strike through, underline, in some cases highlighted fashion. And so I want to point out it's May 14th, and we normally haven't approved these until June, so we are in really great shape. We're looking at this as any other policy, where we are looking at it as a 2-meeting piece, so we don't, it's simply tonight is just to share it with you. Don't worry, we're not going through all the handbooks because you have them. What I would ask in this first time around would be that as you're looking at these handbooks, to focus in on the areas only where there are changes right now. In the past, you never saw the entire handbook, right? You only ever saw the changes. So many of the things that are in the handbooks might have been around since the dawn of time, right? And we are, when Dr. Chris Richardson came to the district in 2003, one of the first things that he did was really do some yeoman's effort on policy. And I think every policy in the district changed. And over Chris's 12 years, we then just modified policies and things as we went along. We are now at a point where we realize we need to get that on a regular schedule. So your policy committee, which has met, frankly, infrequently for the last decade or so, will be coming back to a standard protocol of meeting 4 times a year in September, October, November, and December. The first thing that they will take next fall will be all of these student handbooks to look at the parts that have not been changed. Now, if you notice a very egregious kind of thing, of course, share that with us. We'll make sure we get it fixed before the next time. Rob did point out something that we had missed that Mr. Lear has already changed in the handbook this evening to make sure that it was aligned. So please feel free to give that feedback directly to me between now and our next meeting. And then if there are specific things around the things that we're suggesting to strike through and underline for this particular time, that's where I'm asking the board. Of course, it's at your purview to tell us what you'd like on this, but I think just in terms of the economy of scale, focusing on the things that are the changes this time, then the policy committee will look at the handbooks in their entirety next fall, and we'll have plenty of time to be able to do some updating, if you will, because there are parts of the handbook, because they've not been looked at in some time, that probably need a little bit of fresh coat of paint. One piece I want to point out is that you saw something from the Minnesota Department of Education in your packet that immediately preceded the handbooks. Since this went to press last week, we already have a change from the department because this is the standardized test opt-out form. So what is happening is we are now required to make sure that we provide parents and guardians in the handbook, and the department has been very clear that these have to go on the handbook. So the handbooks for the building, this statewide testing document will be the final part of the handbook. It will not go in the student citizenship handbook, because that covers behavior discipline. It will not go in the activities handbook, because of course that governs a separate section, but in the ALC handbook, the 3 elementary schools combined handbook, middle school and high school handbook, this opt-out form will be available. So given that frame, that this is really the first reading, you're going to have another opportunity, and even if because of the nature of this, we need to go to the June 14th meeting before we make any final approvals, we are in good shape because we have started early. I did ask Joel to hang around because there were a couple of pieces that were in the high school handbook that I know a couple board members had expressed some question on, and I wanted him to be able to explain the thought process there if people wanted to answer those questions tonight. So, Joel, you could just wait until people have questions, but are there any questions this evening on this first round of reading these? Because these are board policy. When you approve them, they're board policy. So if anyone has a question, we'll do the best that we can to answer questions about 6 handbooks tonight, but frankly, most likely what we're going to have to do is take a note and bring you back a more qualified answer the next time in most cases.
Okay.
We'll take a stab at it though.
Okay, excellent, thank you. Jeff?
How often as a board are we reviewing the handbook?
So every year you have reviewed the changes only. Moving forward, we will do a deep dive on these handbooks next fall in terms of really making sure the board is comfortable with it. Then we'll go back and do more of a maintenance mode and then have them on a schedule where we'll still be doing the updates every year, but then more of a deep review along with all the other policies in the district. Our hope is to have a review of all policies and handbooks every 4 years, which means we may divide out the handbooks each year, in terms of even things that the administrators are not bringing forward for changes, if that makes sense. So we'll get on a schedule and a cycle. That way there's predictability and we can make sure that it is updated on a fairly regular basis.
Other questions? Ellen?
So I had a couple of questions on the Northfield Raiders.
The high school, that's the high school one, yeah.
So I have 3 questions, if that's okay. So the first is Chinese all done? Is that the case? Okay. I was just looking at the staff changes. And then the second question, I had a question about the TAs and then a question about the change in how course registration happens. So the course registration, I don't think there's page numbers on here. No, it's right above drug dog searches in 18-year-olds. And so if you go alphabetical, it's in the B's. So the highlighted part, so it seems like this makes a lot of sense, the whole drop ad, and I think it would make things easier. It was just more the communications piece of, because this is going to be new, that highlighting it for parents and students, so who, they get this every year, oh yeah, it's a handbook, but this is a new thing that all of a sudden, the course after the deadline results in a failing semester grade, and if holding to that.
You bet. Yeah, no, so the communication will obviously be paramount. We've, counselors have already actually kind of begun to introduce that process and talking with students in the registration this spring for next year. And we'll be able to communicate that over the course of the summer as we lock in schedules and then ultimately when schedules go live in August. So yes, for sure, it'll be important that students understand that change. We'll definitely be able to highlight those.
And then my second question was that it's alphabetically, it's the teacher assistant that's crossed out. So that's no longer it being an option for students that had been teacher assistants that are being removed, is that?
I'm going to have to look at that. And I may have to get back to you on that piece.
Yeah, and that's the purpose. I mean, you're talking about a pre-system, so if there are questions, if we get some of those out this evening, we'll come back, or if there are questions that you have as you look at this in the next couple of weeks, if people get me the questions, we can kind of get a bulleted FAQ for people. Because the key thing is that while the building principal is, of course, responsible for the handbook, and there's a lot of people who are involved in that process at the administration, counselor, other levels. So I think if we have some other questions, we may just need to bring them back in kind of a bulleted FAQ form.
So other questions from board members?
I know it's a lot of paper, but this is something we've talked about over the last couple of years to make sure that you see these in their entirety so you understood the context of the changes. And so we'll do everything we can to limit this kind of paper to you every year. But for you to see the context, you're going to have to get the paper. So it's 6 of one, half dozen of another, I suppose, with that.
So what you would envision then in terms of the makeup of the policy committee? We have 3 board members who serve on that, but who else would be a part of that process?
So the policy committee will include myself and the 3 board members assigned to that. And then I see the policy committee having some utility infielders, so to speak. People, so for something like the handbooks, if we're specifically discussing the high school handbook at one meeting, it may be Joel, it may be Marty Thompson, it might be one of the counselors who come to help us with that. It could be a teacher rep. If we're talking about the elementary handbooks, it could be it might be all 3 elementary principals. If we're talking about an HR policy, I envision Molly being at the table. So again, in fact, we really want to bring in the experts that we have, rather than just having people on there all the time, bringing them, inviting them specifically to meetings or policies that they govern are part of the issue or part of the agenda.
Sure, Ellen.
So it's not on the actual meetings, but on that process as board members with the policy. So one of the things that Dr. Hillman and I had talked about which is in one of these now, is the form where you request to not be part of the directory. And so there's nothing changed on that. That's the form that we always have. But we've talked about, so would that committee as part of that, or is that something that your leadership staff would be looking at, and then the policy group would look at how the language was changed? So just an example of how might that work.
I think that's a very fair point. In terms of ahead of a policy committee meeting, there may be some work done by the professional staff to tee it up for you, for lack of a better term. And frankly, there are going to be a couple of policies that we are going to be looking at yet this spring. I think the minor changes that we're looking to, the denial of release of information, really specifically around people who are involved in activities. So the way it reads right now is that if I sign out, or if I say that I don't want my child's information published, the issue that we can have is that we may not put them in a choir concert program, yet they intentionally signed up for that. So that one is relatively simple, looking to add, I want my child to be in any activities, programs that they have selected. That one we may bring to you yet, even starting in the next meeting. The other one that Erin referenced that we will have for you yet this spring and into the summer is some of this piece around specifically about our licensed child care and this ongoing background check piece, because what happens when someone has been an employee for some time, the state and feds require that they be background checked. What happens, not if, but when an employee no longer passes the background check that we would expect for initial employment? So we have to start looking at that piece as well. So we think they're going to start it in the summer, though they have not followed through basically in their previous rounds.
They said September now with a full implementation.
So again, we now have a little bit more time with that, and this is probably the third or fourth time they've pushed it back. So, but I envision that there will still be some things that we do with policy during the year like we've done them in the past as things come up. But in general, we're going to say, this year we're looking at this chunk of policy. And that may even inform board members if there's a particular area that you are more interested in, that people say, hey, when we get to that, I might want to be on the committee at that point. And then using our professional staff to help tee things up for you, for lack of a better term.
Excellent. So then, so for September, when you address a certain parts of, maybe you address the elementary school, would you envision then that the board coming out of that would approve those changes shortly after that time period of review, or would you just continue to do it all towards the end of this May, June time period? And it may be something you still yet to think about.
My sense would be that we would bring some of them to you in chunks, as that process goes, with the new policies going into effect in July 1 of the next year, in a lot of cases, because it is hard to change the rules of the game midstream. So we're talking about something for a handbook, especially after a handbook has been published, any of those kinds of changes wouldn't go in effect until the next year.
Sure.
There might be some that we say this goes into effect now, and that will be important in the motion, right, in terms of when we approve the policy, that this goes into effect at the state.
Okay, good. Well, it sounds like a good process, and I think it's one where, right now it's a bit daunting to look at all this, but to know that we have this process going forward, I think will be really good.
We're going to put it into digestible chunks for everybody.
Exactly. Excellent. So I think the takeaway then is if everyone has the opportunity to at least review what's here as proposed changes, knowing that there's a more comprehensive review starting beginning in September. So again, over the course of the next 2 weeks, questions, comments, or around the proposed changes, and then we will address that as an item for individual action. Amy?
I did look through it, but I was wondering if there was some way of having like a summary of the changes, or what pages the changes are on, or something, just to make it easier for referring back to it as we continue our discussion.
So that's what we used to do.
Right.
And so you have now, what you've got, because that's what we were asked to go this direction, which is perfect. I actually like this. So I don't have a summary for you right now. I can have a needed develop one to say which particular pages are the issues. We can have that developed for the next time. But just that's what we used to do, and we now are we're doing it this way to provide that context. But what I'm hearing you say is kind of a master list about the
Even
changes.
make sure to check this page or, this page, just and then dropping or adding classes or something. Just,
Sure.
There's not page numbers on a lot of these.
We'll fix that. We've already, Anita and I have already noticed that there's some consistency, and it's through no one's fault of their own because these handbooks developed on their own over the years. But Anita and I are going to work with the buildings to help create a little bit more consistency in some of the common parts of it, including things like page numbers and tables of contents and things like that. But we can definitely, I can have Anita generate, here are the pages where there's the strike through underline.
And just, I don't have an answer to this, but I having read through these for many years with my daughter, they're awfully lengthy. And,
Yep.
and I know it's all important, but is there got attention span for probably both parents and kids? I would make her sit through it, but is there some way of highlighting the most important pieces? Or, it's all important, but if people are only going to look at it for 10 minutes and it takes a half an hour, what do we put first? Or how do we structure it so they get the pieces that are most likely to affect them?
Yep, and that's a trick because, things that are in the handbook most of the time is because we had a problem with them at one point, so now we put it in the handbook. And that's the chicken or the egg piece in terms of, what I do think is a key piece is making sure that we have a good, strong index, for each of them, which we don't currently have for each one. And the issue is going to be that the moment that we start emphasizing some parts over another, I think that what you're setting yourself up for are questions or concerns that, wait a minute, if this was in the handbook, but you didn't emphasize it, and now either I'm being held accountable or I don't it is a trick. That is because I'm all with you, how could we simplify it? I think that is something that we look at every year, and the policy group can look at that from time to time to say, is that something that is necessary to have in the handbook anymore? Handbooks grow. The activities handbook, as you see, is the longest one, and my sense is it's the longest one because, as Ellen pointed out to me earlier today, it governs coaches, it governs athletes, it governs procedures and all these kinds of different pieces. And my sense is over the past 25 or so years, it's just been added to with each time. We weren't clear enough with that, and so now, clarity. And in the interest of clarity, we've gone back to making it not clear because there's so much in the handbook that. I think if we could solve this one, we'll bottle and sell it because we will set this. I think our handbooks are actually probably pretty limited compared to a lot of places. But I don't disagree with Amy, it's just a piece of pick your poison.
Or maybe it's just the writing style is very dry and somehow making it more engaging. Or
policy writing isn't exciting? I think it's very exciting. No, I do understand, and we'll continue to try to look at that. The piece is trying to make, when you're trying to make things as clear as you possibly can, sometimes you end up using more words than what you would normally use.
Okay, any other final questions or comments? Okay, we will bring these changes back to items for individual action at our May 29th board meeting. So that does conclude items for discussion and report. We'll move on to approval of the consent grouping. As a reminder, there were a few personnel items in the table file to be added to the consent grouping. Is there anything anyone would like to pull from the consent grouping? Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Jeff. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Rob. All those in favor of approving the consent grouping, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we'll move on to the superintendent's report, which typically includes items for individual action, of which we have none tonight. So we will have a report by Dr. Hillman on the facilities action team.
Yes, I didn't want the superintendent's report to be lonely tonight without nothing there, so we moved this, which would normally have been a discussion or report item, to this part of the agenda. I'm going to give a very brief overview because I know people on the board are aware of how we had handled the facilities action team. Approximately more than 30 people were invited to participate in the facilities action team. We intentionally sought out a variety of opinions. We held 3 meetings that were very heavily scripted in terms of the activities, a mix of some information sharing based upon participant questions and discussion time for the participants to give the district feedback. First meeting, reflection and analysis, looking back at the referendum from 2017. what resonated with people, what were deal breakers for people, what were things that were misunderstood. We used a post-it note strategy where people worked in small groups so that everyone, whether you're extroverted or introverted, had a chance to participate. And we then used big paper, as my wife likes to say, we used big paper and stuck the post-it notes up to try to basically just cluster the ideas. After each meeting, what we did is we also did a follow-up survey asking what went well about the meeting, what could have been better, and any burning questions that people had. There were also some specific questions to each of the meetings as well. Meeting 2 was looking forward. Basically, we answered some questions from the previous meeting. Looking ahead, what we asked is for people to look at what are things that are currently in the plan that we should, for lack of a better term right now, keep going forward with. Further exploration, continue down that path. Are there parts of the facilities plan at this point that we should just press the pause button on because people aren't quite ready for it? And then third, were there any new ideas that had not come out in the 24 public meetings that we had over a couple of years that we would want to look and vet? That was the second meeting. Again, same process. The third meeting, we attempted to run the meeting as if it was almost a political caucus, if you will, where members of the team could they had quite a bit of time to discuss. We gave them a tool that they could use to plan their motions. If you ever listen to the Intelligence Squared debates on public radio, somebody makes a motion, people argue for the motion, against. That was part of the process as well. People made a motion. If they got a second, it would go into a Google Sheet that Val Murdersdorf was updating live in terms of that would be a question posed to the rest of the committee. After we went through that particular process, we had 15 different recommendations. They were all in a Google form. Participants were asked to bring their device, or we had some extras for them as well, and they basically got to vote on each recommendation. I can support the recommendation, I can live with the recommendation, I can't support the recommendation. We had it up on the screen, live, transparent, so people could see exactly what was happening. We sent all of the data back out to people the next day, and as board members, I've copied you on these messages every step of the way. If we take a look at the, I'm going to go to the end of the document that I sent to you, because you're seeing all of the different graphs there, but I'm going to give you my highlighted executive summary and then what I'm going to ask for you next, if that's okay. First of all, we take a look at the key takeaways. I think what's one interesting piece is participants mostly supported the recommendation to consider updating the demographic study. Coincidentally, the person who made that motion caught me a couple of days later and said, you know, I've been talking to people, I'm not sure that would actually give us the data that we need, but it was something that 57% of the people supported in terms of looking at a demographic study. We also know that participants mostly...
I'm sorry, Matt, what part are you looking at?
I'm looking at the last page, page 10, because I've got page numbers on it, yes. The second key takeaway, participants mostly supported asking the voters in November of 2018 to consider elementary school projects. That was 57% supporting, and I'm looking at the bulleted list at the end here on page 10 right now, and 21% who said they could live with it. Now it's interesting because there was also a recommendation to look at those projects in 2019, and that had a little bit of a different spread. And again, all those charts are in your packet here. I'm just trying to give the high-level overview. Participants, again, there were motions and recommendations that were positive with very specific, do this, consider doing this by this time, but there were also null recommendations where people would say something, you know, please don't do this. So we saw that in a couple of areas where participants generally rejected, 71% saying they could not support, waiting until all current debt is retired before you brought any bond referendum forward, which what that shows is that people know we need to do something before 2025. We also saw people look at some things that had come from previous. We did have a motion and a second for the board to consider bringing back the 2017 bond referendum in one question as previously presented. 64% of the people on this committee could not support that, nor could they support it in terms of bringing it back in two different questions, as was also made a recommendation, with only 32% of people supporting that. We also saw that 57% of the people encouraged the school district to encourage us to look at exploring corporate sponsorship or private donations to supplement funding. A few years ago, I would have said this is just really out of balance for a public entity to consider this, but in the last decade, you have started to see school districts as close as Cass and Mantorville, when they added some performing arts center where they have corporate sponsorship on a number of different pieces. And, as we move forward, if the board feels that's something that you would like me to, research, I certainly will, because I do think that there may be some avenues there for us to look to reduce the potential bond in terms of by seeking out successful alumni or looking to other business corporate sponsorship. So it's a new area for me to look into, but it's something we certainly are willing to look for. This was a group that we asked for their thoughts, and if they had nearly 2/3 of the people thinking that something looked pretty reasonable, I think we should take a look at it. We also had people who generally rejected, 60% could not support adding enough dollars to any fall referendum for elementary projects, because this recommendation came after the others. Basically, the motion was add enough dollars to the fall referendum to renovate the high school to last 30 more years. And again, 60% of the people rejected that, saying they could not support that. So what I like about that particular process is that we had both positive do this by then, suggesting you do this by then, but also saying, you probably shouldn't look at this particular piece. So it was really kind of a nice mix of telling you what people supported, but what also people couldn't support. We also did have some very interesting ideas that came forward. One was to consider swapping the middle school and high school. So looking at, do we have to add on to the current middle school? Could we make that into a high school? That particular recommendation did not get enough support where I included in the key takeaways, but it did spawn some interesting discussion, which was very good. And so we want to make sure that you have every single recommendation that was made, you have the charting. I did realize that Google probably could use a little bit of a different coloring scheme, because the red is actually the stuff that is I could live with, and the yellow is the stuff that I can't support. I don't own Google quite yet, so I can't make that correction. I've also included in the packet for you the comments from every follow-up survey, as well as the work product. So you have, some of you were able to attend a handful of the meetings, you attended in an advisory role, people did not participate. We did have one meeting where we did have 4 folks there, but again, this was an advisory committee. There's a provision of the open meeting law that allows us to have you there for that. So we are very intentional about that particular part of it, and I made mention of that at each board meeting. So I want to just also recognize, in addition to the names of the people who you saw in that grid at the top, I want to thank board members who came to these meetings. I know that not everybody could make all of them, and it was perfectly fine. Well, there might have been, Amy, you might have been at all of them, but for the most part, people were able to come and go as they were, which was really great, because I was at a meeting the next day, and I had a person who was on the committee give a little summary, and a person at the meeting said, well, is the board really going to listen to this? And the person said, absolutely. Their board members were at every one. They weren't all at all of them, but they expressed a very sincere desire to listen to this committee because of the diversity of voices that we brought forward. So with that being said, I just want to also thank Aaron Bailey. I want to thank Val Murdersdorf, Jim Colseth, and Sam Richardson, who are our professional staff who were there to support us in that process. And it was really, really great. They all had a chance to help clear up some misunderstandings and provide some data that was important to folks. So we have some recommendations. In some cases, interesting how it actually kind of mirrored some of the election, if you really look at it. The way I look at the I live with it, I can live with it category is if you split that down the middle and give half of it to the I can support and half of it to I can't support, that gives you some information to say, do we have enough of a buffer there to be able to implement or ask the public to consider implementing at least part of the master facilities plan? I have to look at the data and say that the data suggests to me, and I have to be honest about it, that it does not appear that at this point, right now at this moment in time, that the substantial portion of this group could support looking at all of the master facilities plan at once. That's what the data tells us. It does appear that there is an avenue of support for looking at the early learning component. So I will open up for questions and any quick discussion as well, but I would like to suggest that we have a work session sometime in May, if we can try to find a date, to be able to discuss this in a little bit of greater detail. November of 2018, if that is something that you have an interest in, is coming quickly. Now, we didn't have to go back and do all the work that we did previously with the master facilities plan, right? So, my hope would be that we have done the first round of, if you had a desire to bring anything to the public in the fall, we have already educated them on a substantial portion of this. So, I would love, if I could, to have some kind of direction in June, in terms of whether we want to move forward or not. This could be a topic on our next board meeting. If you don't feel that we necessarily need to have a full work session, we'll have a little bit of a lighter agenda next time. We'll have the general fund budget the next time, which is the cornerstone. What'd you say?
That's not light.
Yes, well, but I'm talking about that will be the most major presentation. I'm talking about in terms of time value. It's 9:52 and she still has a sense of humor. I love it. That's great. So, if you believe that we'd have enough time at our May 29th meeting to explore this, because again, we're not going down the road of all brand new stuff, right? These are things that you have engaged in 6+ hours of work session last year, 24 previous public meetings. So I just wanted to give you the option, if you'd like to have a work session, we certainly could find a date to do that. If you would like to just try to say, let's have a more robust discussion on the 29th, and then if we need to have some kind of work session after that, we can certainly look at that as well. Because remember, we don't have to call the election until 93 days before. I'm saying, I'm not telling you that's what I want to do, but by law, we have, we wouldn't have to actually make that call until early August. I prefer to have the summer to be able to do some work, if that's the direction you want us to go. But I just want, if there are questions, or if you think that, let's have some discussion now, and then let's just have a follow-up discussion at the next board meeting and see where we're at. We may know more at that point. So, trying to keep it brief, yet give you the salient details here.
Okay, excellent. Well, we appreciate the comprehensive report on the work done by the committee, and obviously the work of the committee that we're so generous with their time to come and give us this great feedback. How are board members feeling then in terms of next steps? I would anticipate that obviously no later than August, if we were to move forward with something in November in terms of...
The law says we'd have to have it called well before then, yeah.
Right. So with only one board meeting in June and one board meeting in July, the balance of May.
And we can always have a special meeting,
right,
in terms of if we needed to.
So I guess the question is, do board members want to pursue a more lengthy discussion at our May 29th board meeting, or would we want to schedule a work session type format? Margaret?
I'd rather explore a special session.
A work session? Mm-hmm. Okay.
I agree with that. I think it's whatever we do, it's the most significant thing that we will choose to do, and it's something that everybody's asking about and it's on people's minds. It's certainly the question I get most often is, what are we going to do next? And I don't think we should try to put it just as a smaller portion of another meeting. I think we need to be able to really talk about it and discuss it. I mean, not that it can't also be another discussion, but I think we need to really take the time and make sure we've considered everything we think we should consider before moving forward.
So I'm hearing a couple of support for work session. Is there anyone who would prefer just to do it at a board meeting? I know, Ellen, you have some travel dates coming up to work.
And Rob does too.
And Rob as well. So
It's getting tight.
it is getting
Well,
tight.
what I could do is, the first thing I have, I need to, do a doodle poll in the morning. We could gather, is there a date, between now and May 29th that we could have a chance to meet? And if we can't, we can take the next step at that point. And if we have to look in June, we certainly can. As you said, certainly want to make sure there's enough opportunity for discussion, for it. At the same time, just want to make sure that we use the best use of your time.
Okay. So then what we'll do then is have a doodle poll go out tomorrow sometime in which we would schedule a work session. And I think we have found that 5 o'clock works for people to be there. So we'll try to endeavor to find a time that works for everyone and really delve into this topic then.
And if people have questions or comments about this document, I certainly can take a few at this time.
Sure. Good question. Amy?
I have a comment about it.
Yeah.
As one of the people who attended all 3 sessions, I went in not quite knowing how it was going to go and how we could get really useful information, helpful ideas out of this group. And I just wanted to thank Dr. Hillman because I ended up very impressed with the amount of information he could convey in the time period given and the amount of engagement that he was able to facilitate in the 30 people who attended, and to end up with, I think, some way of analyzing, feeling like everybody there had a voice, because some of the people were louder than other people, but ultimately everyone, I think, has a voice in these results. And I just want to thank you because I was really happy with, in the end, wondering early on where it was going. By the end, I was really happy how it turned out.
Thank you, it was my pleasure. It was actually a lot of fun. I'm also a dork that way, so.
Other questions or comments? Excellent.
Margaret, this one.
Just
Yes,
a quick one. I echo everything that Amy said. I think it was an excellent evening. It was very exciting. The only thing that makes me stop up short was how few women we had. And it was about 3/4 men and 1/4 women. And I don't know where we went off the rails with that. I feel like it should have been an equal representation. That's just a comment.
I'm really happy you asked that question because there were 5 members of the committee who had committed to coming, who did not show up. Every single one of them a woman.
Okay.
And so when Julie and I had looked, at the list ahead of time, we had a very intentional way of trying to do some gender balance and looking across at how the community could be represented. And I have not listed those people on the list because they had initially committed, and then various things happened that provided. So we were very intentional on the gender balance to begin with, and unfortunately, it worked out that way. But I just want to assure you, Margaret, and the community that that was something that was at the forefront of our mind to begin with. And there was just an unfortunate series of events where every one person who couldn't come, it did throw off the gender balance.
Yeah, because I'm thinking even if we added those 5, that's still only 35% women. So we just need to do a little better.
Don't disagree.
Representation.
And we're very intentional about trying to think about how could we make sure that different segments of the community, business, agriculture, all those particular areas could make sure that we were represented. And in some cases we did well, in other cases we did not. We did also have a few Latino members of our community who were part of the committee. Were not able to make it for each, but we did have an interpreter at each session. Again, trying to show that we are making sure that we're getting as much input from everyone as we possibly can.
And I thank you for that effort. It's just a comment.
No, I acknowledge that at one of the meetings. So.
Other questions or comments?
It's 10 o'clock.
Yes, because it is 10 o'clock, I would entertain a motion to continue the board meeting past 10 p.m.
I will make that motion in a moment, but I would like to say that one of the measures of a good leader is to recognize the quality of the people that surround that leader. And I think that the presentations that we heard tonight were excellent and certainly support that theory. With that, I move to adjourn.
No, we're moving to. We actually have a couple more. Yeah, well, we have.
News is on.
I know. We have a couple.
What Trump is doing.
We do have a couple of more agenda items, so we shouldn't have to go much beyond 10 p.m. But because we are bound to adjourn by 10, we would need a motion to continue past 10. Okay. So moved by Amy. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. We will move forward. Then if we have had the...
I voted nay.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. 1 no. Okay, so we have, motion carries. So we will quickly move through the balance of the agenda, which just includes, unless anyone had any further comments on the facilities action team report, was there any? None? Okay, we'll move on to items for information. Dr. Hillman, we had the enrollment report for May of 2018.
The enrollment report shows we're up to 3991 as of May 1st, and that will be coming out to the end of the year here pretty quickly.
Okay. Any questions or comments on the enrollment report? All right, we'll move on to district communications. Dr. Hillman.
Yes, this is just a very brief heads up for board members that we've been thinking about how we communicate with the public. And personally, I've always been given really high marks in terms of communication, but we continue to hear, from the community that the school district can continue to do better about communication. So we've been looking at a number of different ways that we can accomplish that. And one of the things is that we have seen a number of school districts around us that have hired full-time communication directors, schools as small as Fairville and Owatonna. We're not quite ready to do that, but what I am going to be bringing to you is a recommendation in the next couple of meetings to do a contract for service with either a firm or an individual to provide strategic assistance with the school district on the area of communications. In order to do that, we always are looking at what are the offsets in the budget. So I just want to make sure that board members get the heads up that Aaron and I have been looking at how we've done the communications over the years. We do have one position that we are looking at as sunsetting or eliminating the position. Times have changed and the way we communicate has evolved. We also owe that fiscal stability and stewardship to residents, and so just know we are looking at the potential elimination of a position within the community services division, the word and web design specialist position that we would look to potentially eliminate in order to pay for this new contract for service. So I just want to give board members that heads up that you'll be seeing that coming down the line. We've had some really good communication with some communication experts in the community who have endorsed our strategy and are giving us some guidance on how we could potentially do that. So again, that's just a heads up for you so that when it comes down the line, you're not surprised by it.
Okay, excellent. Any initial questions or comments? Okay. Yes, Rob, sorry.
Do you know how you're going to advertise this position or this?
So it won't be a position because it's a contract for service. So what we'll be looking at is, because it's a contracted service, we can do direct negotiation. So we will be certainly looking at people to reach out to have them give us quotations. So if there is a firm or someone that you have an interest in us taking a look at, we can certainly take that information. We have been talking with some local communications experts about who are the firms and or the potential freelance candidates that may be able to support us in this. And then we'll be reaching out to folks. We'll have some criteria of what we're looking for within the budget that we of course have, and we'll be looking to make some direct negotiations in that way.
Any other questions? Comments? Yes, Jeff.
Briefly, before we had kind of a crisis management process and a person for that who's the true spokesman in cases like that. And I see under your tenure here, whatever, we're just kind of going to you for that, and then you can direct that however you want. So is that kind of our protocol?
Yeah, the district's crisis plan says that that's one of the things that comes with my job is I'm the spokesperson. And so, in a time of crisis, we think it's important that the district speak with one voice, and for the most part, that voice is me. And so that's part of the job. And as we look forward, as our communications continue to evolve, that is something that we will certainly continue to evaluate. What is the appropriate way to make sure we deliver the crisis communication? At this point, I think that the community expects that the superintendent, to the best of their ability, handle that right now.
Okay. Any other last minute comments or questions on the communications? We will just look forward to additional information as that comes forward in future meetings. Speaking of future meetings, our next board meeting in May, please take note, will be held on Tuesday, May 29th at 7 p.m. due to the Memorial Day holiday. And then again, we have one meeting in June, which is Monday, June 11th, and one meeting in July, which is Monday, July 9th, both at 7 p.m. in the High School Media Center. With that, I ask for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Noel, is there a second? Second by Amy. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. We are adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
I had to do that on purpose.